Chapter 561, Confusing Naruto. Having dealt with all the issues, Fujin finally decided to start training the spirit transformation jutsu. He sent a shadow clone to Hiruzen to clear up some of the doubts he had while reading through the scroll. While waiting for the clone to send back the memories, he went through the scroll once again. Meanwhile, his remaining clones continued working on the Fuin battlefield. After the clone met with Hiruzen and discussed the doubts and sent memories back to Fujin, he began his training. The next morning, Fujin sent a shadow clone with 5% of his chakra to train his new students while he continued his training. As for their training, Fujin divided it into two parts for the time being. The first was the physical workout, which would happen in the morning. The training made the five of them understand why Fujin was so much stronger than their previous instructors. Fujin's clone replaced the training seals Danzo had given them with his own. As for the training intensity, it was slightly lower as Fujin wanted to make them get used to it. That said, it was still far more intense than what they had experienced so far. The reason for such intensity was that Fujin intended to teach them the strong fist style. Apart from its effectiveness, the main reason for it was this thought of Fujin: I could teach them either the Senju Taijutsu style or the strong fist Taijutsu style. That said, even though Renjiro said that anyone could learn it, teaching it liberally without their permission might cause some dissatisfaction. They might agree if I take permission, but they will use it to show that I owe them a favor. By comparison, Guy will be ecstatic that I taught his fighting style to more kids who are full of youth. In addition, it is more practical in a fight than the Senju Taijutsu style. More importantly, I can just dump their Taijutsu training on him after they reach a certain level. Knowing him, he might see it as a gift rather than work. The second part of their training, which would happen in the afternoon, was ninjutsu. The five of them were already very good at ninjutsu for their age. Neither Fujin nor any of his classmates were that good. Despite that, Fujin stopped all their current training in ninjutsu. Instead, he made them focus on just one jutsu. That was the forbidden multi-shadow clone jutsu. Unlike Naruto, where Fujin was afraid that the future would change dramatically if Fujin made him abuse that training method, Fujin didn't have any such concerns with these kids. Their chakra was too low for them to abuse that training method beyond a certain limit, just like how it was for Fujin when he was younger. And, considering their young age and significantly lower potential than Naruto, Fujin didn't see any of them going beyond the rank S level in merely 4 years. Even with his guidance, he couldn't guarantee that they would reach rank S, let alone surpass it. That's why he decided to abuse this training tactic to its limits while training them. Life continued for a few days in this manner without any external disturbances until Naruto finally visited Fujin's house. Kakashi had finally taken some pity on the trio and given them a day off. The three of them never appreciated a holiday as much as they did now. Fujin opened his door to see an exhausted Naruto. He raised his eyebrow and wondered. Kakashi let them go last evening. Since when did this kid stop recovering in a day? Of course, he couldn't say that he had been spying on them. So Fujin asked in a peculiar tone, "What happened to you? You look like you have just run a marathon around the world without taking a break, almost as if you'd be killed if you stopped." Naruto looked at Fujin with a look full of complaints. After all, it was his suggestions that had created this situation. He muttered, "You don't know how right you are." Fujin chuckled and said, "Oh really? Come on in, tell me everything." While Fujin had already seen most of the things that happened, there was no reason to refuse the amusement Naruto's ranting would bring. Naruto listed out all of his complaints against Kakashi to Fujin. To his annoyance, Fujin just chuckled every time. Finally, he added while pointing towards Fujin, "You were totally wrong this time. Kakashi-sensei wasn't testing us. Instead, he is punishing us because we tried those stunts." HMPH, Fujin raised an eyebrow and asked, "How am I wrong? Isn't he giving you your special training right now?" "Special my ass. All he did was torture us with physical workouts." He didn't teach us any jutsus. Instead, he keeps threatening us with the 1,000 years of death jutsu. Do you know how painful that jutsu is? Sakura-chan blames me for our current situation. Naruto complained in annoyance once again. Even for someone who had great control over his emotions, Fujin had to work extremely hard to stifle his laughter. He barely managed to control himself and put up a thoughtful expression while muttering, let's see." Fujin pretended to think for a couple of minutes while Naruto waited for him with some curiosity. Finally, Fujin said, "I disagree. I wasn't wrong. The only point I miscalculated was that Kakashi would take training your bodies so seriously." That said, he isn't wrong. Having a strong body is the most important thing for any ninja. Without it, you'll never become strong, let alone have any chance of becoming the Hokage. Had I been the teacher of your team, I would have started such training from day one. I guess he initially thought that you three wouldn't be able to endure such training. Your attempts to get his book and see his real face should have given him confidence that you are worthy of his training. Naruto was left speechless by Fujin's words. He immediately fell into deep thought. Could it be as he said? This time, Fujin didn't disturb him. Instead, he just watched the comical expressions Naruto kept making with a smile on his face. Naruto thought hard for a few minutes before saying, "Man, I never thought of it in this manner." Fujin nodded and said, "See, even though it might be difficult, it is better than just doing the boring formation exercises and rank D missions, right? In a few months, you'll notice the improvements in your physique, strength, stamina, and speed." Naruto agreed and said, "You are right. I didn't think of that, but when will he teach us cool jutsus? You said he knows 1,000 jutsus, right?" Fujin put up a thoughtful expression again and said, "I am not too sure. I thought that he might teach that instead of focusing on physical training. I guess he thought that your physiques aren't good enough to depend heavily on ninjutsu just yet. Considering what you said, he wouldn't be wrong to think that. He might teach you jutsus once he thinks that your basics are strong enough. Unless—" Fujin took a pause. Naruto impatiently asked, "Unless what?" Fujin smiled mischievously and said, "Unless this training is a test as well. If you are able to steal his book or unmask him despite undergoing such heavy training, then he might think that the three of you are ready to learn dozens of cool new special powerful jutsus." Naruto was immediately impressed. He asked excitedly, "Really?" However, his excitement quickly waned as he remembered what training he had been undergoing. They barely had the energy to do the training. In fact, none of them could live up to Kakashi's standards as none of them could actually complete the workouts. They had to do their level best to ensure that they didn't pass out. He became dejected and said, "That's impossible." Fujin chuckled and asked, "Do you think that you can become the Hokage if such simple training makes you quit?" That immediately hit Naruto's ego. He exclaimed loudly, "I will steal Kakashi-sensei's book, believe it." While Fujin was tricking Naruto into creating more trouble for Kakashi, both of them were unaware that someone was secretly spying on Fujin's house. Some distance away from Fujin's house, Kakashi hid among the trees while watching Fujin's house even though he couldn't see anything inside it. He thought, as I expected, someone was behind their change, that someone should be Fujin. However, why would he do something like that? Kakashi tried thinking but couldn't come up with any good reason for Fujin to do something like that. However, he had a strong hunch that Fujin was indeed the one who prompted Naruto and the rest to act. Since he couldn't think of a reason, he turned his attention back to the house and wondered, that aside, why does his house give me a weird feeling? It's as if there are many seals around that house. Kakashi, though he wasn't a Fuinjutsu grandmaster, still knew enough basics that he could be considered a seal master. He could see and identify most, if not all seals. He closed his right eye, opened his left eye and began observing Fujin's home. His eye immediately widened as much as it physically could. Chapter 562, 27,569. What in the fucking hell? Even someone as calm and composed as Kakashi was completely flabbergasted by what he witnessed. The sight was just too absurd and too horrifying. With his Sharingan, he could clearly see the seals that Fujin had placed. The entire compound was densely covered in seals. Fujin's house was the worst. It was so densely covered in seals that Kakashi's Sharingan couldn't even see the walls of his house. He cursed, "What is that? Why are there so many seals? Did he put seals on the house to protect it, or did he build a house there to have something to put the seals on?" Kakashi was astonished. Every top ninja's house would be covered in seals. Even Kakashi's house had several seals. After the root was blown up, even the Jounins from the civilian background paid seal masters to secure their houses with seals. However, it was the first time that Kakashi had seen such a dense collection of seals. Normally, it would be rare to see a house in Konoha with more than 100 seals. Kakashi wondered, how many seals are there exactly? Since he had nothing better to do and had a Sharingan, Kakashi began counting the seals. His eyes kept getting wider as the number kept rising. His throat became dry as he realized 27,569 seals. And a very high number of those seals are the ones that can hide other seals. So the actual number might be double that or even more. More importantly, that is just the number of seals on his house. The entire compound has a similar number of seals as well. What in the world is Fujin planning? His house and compound are more of a fortress than a house. Kakashi couldn't think of any good reason for Fujin to do something like that. He thought, since Third hasn't done anything, it's safe to say that there isn't any ill intention behind his actions. That said, I need to be very careful if I ever have to enter that compound. Also, I still need to ask why he made my students do something like that. If I don't, then I have a feeling that my days will become far more chaotic. Kakashi had seen enough for a day. He decided to leave. Fujin was unaware that Kakashi had just checked his house and left as silently as he arrived. If he knew, he would have chuckled at his reactions. By the time Kakashi left, Fujin was done talking with Naruto. He said, "Ah, I nearly forgot. The kids who were supposed to move into the compound did so a few days ago. I'll introduce you to a few of them. If you get along, then I'll arrange for you to move into one of the buildings next to the house." Naruto was immediately excited. All his exhaustion due to Kakashi's training suddenly disappeared as he exclaimed, "Really? You're the best, Fujin." Fujin chuckled and thought, "Guess it was more of a mental fatigue than physical fatigue." He sent a shadow clone to call his 5 students, who arrived in a few minutes and entered his house. They immediately saw Fujin sitting with a blonde kid who looked a few years older than them. Fujin smiled and said, "Come on in, make yourselves comfortable." They entered the circular room and sat on the sofas in the room while curiously looking at Naruto. Yuji curiously asked, "Who is he?" Naruto immediately introduced himself. "I am Uzumaki Naruto. I'll be the Hokage, believe it." The 5 kids just stared at Naruto with a deadpan expression. None of them expected to hear something so absurd. Seeing their stares, even Naruto felt embarrassed. Fujin suddenly coughed, attracting everyone's attention. He said, "Naruto, they are my official students. Get along well with them." Naruto was surprised. He asked, "You accepted students?" Fujin nodded. He looked at his students and said, "He is Naruto. Though he isn't my student, I did guide him a bit before he graduated, so I guess, in a sense, he is your senpai. Right now, he is on Hadake Kakashi's team. You can hang out with him if you want to." The kids were surprised. For starters, they didn't know that Fujin had guided others. However, what surprised them more was Naruto was being taught by Kakashi. Sayaka exclaimed, "Your sensei is Hadake Kakashi, the copy ninja. That's so cool." Her statement immediately earned a peculiar gaze from Fujin, which was felt by her. She looked at Fujin and quickly added, "You're cool as well, sensei." Meanwhile, Naruto wondered. Copy ninja Fujin waved his palm dismissively as he said, "I don't care. I'll be busy for the rest of the day, so we won't be having our afternoon training session today. You can enjoy the remaining day. Naruto, if you want to teach them your pranks, that's fine. Just don't go overboard. Now shoo shoo." By the time Fujin was done speaking, all the 6 kids in his room suddenly felt a breeze. In the blink of an eye, The breeze suddenly became very strong. The doors automatically opened and all six were tossed out of his house. The doors shut tightly right after they were out. Naruto fell to the ground and muttered, "That was new." Naruto was one of the few who had gotten a taste of Fujin's wind domain. Fujin's students had got it as well since Fujin used it to make their training considerably tougher at times. Takeshi sighed and added, "Sensei's control over the wind is super scary." Sayaka muttered, "I still don't understand how someone can have such good control over an element." When they saw it for the first time, the five of them wondered whether Fujin had a Kekkei Genkai. However, none of the existing Kekkei Genkai had such a feature. Naruto didn't care about the winds and instead asked, "By the way, why did you call Kakashi-sensei the copy ninja?" That earned another glare from the five kids. Yuji asked, "Is Hate Kakashi really your teacher?" Naruto nodded. Yuji looked at him like he was an idiot and asked, "So how do you not know that? It's like the most basic information available about him." Naruto ignored his look and said, "Well, I don't know. Would you guys tell me?" Hikari giggled and answered, "He can copy any jutsu after looking at it once. Everyone says that he has copied more than 1,000 jutsus in this manner. That is why he is called as the copy ninja Kakashi by enemy villages." Naruto's eyes widened. He said, "I knew that he knows over 1,000 jutsus. I didn't know he copied them. Still, that's a cool title. I want one too." Sayaka added, "Well, you're just a genin. Generally, only jounins get such titles. Sensei has a cool title as well." Naruto was surprised again. He asked, "Big brother Fujin also has a title?" Yuji teased him once again, "Dude, do you live under a rock?" While training in the route, they had been made to memorize the entire bingo book. They expected that other ninjas would have done so as well. To their surprise, they were wrong. Sayaka said, "Yuji, don't be mean," and yes. Sensei's title might be even cooler. He is called the Spectral Swordsman. Naruto exclaimed, "Damn, that's a cool title. What did Big Bro do to get such a cool title?" Yuji grinned and answered, "No one knows for sure. Sensei's mission record is a top secret. I guess only Lord Hokage knows. Everyone else only knows some rumors." Naruto asked, "What are the rumors?" Yuji grinned even more and added, "They say that he appears and disappears like a specter while harvesting the lives of his targets. He is so scary that the person doesn't realize that he is dead until Sensei is long gone. Some rumors say that there were two people who were walking and talking together and Sensei killed one of them. The other person didn't realize that the one who he had been talking to was dead for several minutes." The way Yuji said it made Naruto feel chills. He nervously said, "I knew Fujin was scary, but I didn't know that he was this scary." Sayaka nodded and added, "Apparently, he has killed a few hundred ninjas in this manner. It was why he was given that title." That said, until this day, no one knows whether he really is the Spectral Swordsman as there is no proof against him. As Yuji said, these are just rumors. The only thing that is true for sure is that those guys are dead. Naruto's face became slightly blue as he said, "That just makes him even more terrifying." The kids nodded. Yuji had gotten bored of teasing Naruto. He asked, "Anyway, Sensei has given us the rest of the day off. Do you know anything fun, Naruto? Sensei said something about pranks." Immediately, a mischievous grin appeared on Naruto's face. That day, several people in Konoha had an extremely annoying day. A particular old man who was peeping into a crystal ball was experiencing a terrible headache. Once again, he was cursing his past self for the choices he made. Chapter 563, Spirit Transformation Technique. Spirit Transformation Jutsu. Fujin was sitting at the center of his basement. Around him were his shadow clones, silently working on a seal that had never appeared in the ninja world. Fujin's mind was focused on his own soul completely. He made the necessary hand seals and used the jutsu Dan created decades ago. Suddenly, a white light slowly exited his body. It immediately attracted the attention of every shadow clone in the basement, who looked at their main body. The white light quickly took form and took Fujin's appearance. Fujin observed himself while thinking, interesting. My form is just like that of my body. There isn't even a hint of my previous life's appearance. In addition, even my soul has similar clothes as my main body, even though it's just my soul taking that form and not actual clothes. I wonder how the soul works. Does it just take the form of whatever body I am currently occupying? If so, how will it work for someone like Orochimaru who keeps changing his body? Does his soul's appearance keep changing every few years? Or has only my soul changed due to getting transmigrated? After all, how can I know what changes my soul underwent during transmigration? Sigh, so many new questions again. Fujin stopped thinking about those questions and instead focused on his soul. He thought, anyway, time to test what all this technique can do. Now, who do I choose as a test subject? Fujin's first thought was one of the orphan kids. However, on second thought, he decided against it. If something went wrong, then the one he chose be crippled or worse, dead. Fujin thought, normally, I'd go out and choose some bandits. I have been training this jutsu for almost a couple of months, so it won't raise any eyebrows if I head out as it has been several months since my last trip. However, this technique isn't like others. I could test something like the 8 trigrams divination seal without any worry. Unfortunately, spirit transformation jutsu has a huge chance of something going wrong. I should test it inside the village, where I can ask for Hiruzen's help quickly. Oh well, it's not like there aren't any test subjects here. That said, let me at least test the movements and other basic skills first. The most basic abilities of this form were invisibility and intangibility. Both were mentioned in the scroll. Fujin applied the techniques, and his soul became invisible. He chuckled and wondered, it works. I don't understand why Jiraiya never learnt this jutsu. It's the perfect jutsu for his research. I wonder if Tsunade and Hiruzen predicted that and decided to never give him that scroll. That should be it. Otherwise, I don't see any reason for Jiraiya to not learn this jutsu. Fujin moved towards the ceiling of the basement and thought, though I didn't know this jutsu earlier, some of my seals are effective against this jutsu. So, no spirit should be able to move in and out of my house. At least not with this technique. Fujin touched the ceiling. As he expected, his hand couldn't phase through. He deactivated the seals that stopped the spirits temporarily and phased through the ceiling. He quickly phased through his house and began flying above his house. A smile formed on his face as he thought, not bad at all. This feeling is great. A smile formed on his face as he thought, not bad at all. This feeling is great. Other than a few seals and barriers, nothing can stop me. I can even fly in this form. Not to mention, my flying speed is amazing. Fujin immediately flew around the village while avoiding the sensitive places. No one could see his spirit. What was more impressive was the speed at which his soul could fly. It exceeded the speed of sound by several times. Fujin thought, such an incredible speed. It might even exceed Raikage speed. And unlike Raikage speed, I have a feeling that I can sustain this speed for days. Only Flying Thunder God is faster as it is nearly instantaneous. Tusk, no wonder Dan could dream about the Hokage seat. Though I don't think he was as strong as Sakumo or the Sanins, this technique is incredibly fearsome. Even the third Raikage and Anoki would have been extremely wary of this jutsu. His lethality might have been just under that of Minato's lethality in the Third Great Ninja War. Having explored the speed and the intangibility, Fujin's soul returned to his body. The shadow clone sighed in relief, seeing that nothing bad happened. Fujin got up and said, "That's enough training for the day. Unless you're close to some sort of breakthrough, dispel yourselves." The seal Fujin was working on was extremely complicated. He didn't want to take the risk of forcefully dispelling a clone that might have a breakthrough and advance the seal further. Hearing his words, all but 3 of his shadow clones dispelled themselves. Fujin collated their memories before leaving his house. He went directly to Konoha's torture and interrogation department. Ibiki was pleasantly surprised to see Fujin until he recalled the scenes when Fujin had visited him the previous time. He thought, fortunately he isn't carrying a prisoner. If he did, I'd have directly diverted him towards the prisons. I don't want my office to stink of vomit and shit. Fujin was unaware of Ibuki's thoughts. He hadn't ever even thought about Mizuki after handing him to Ibuki. He warmly greeted, "Ibuki-san, how have you been?" Ibuki smiled and said, "Have been well. How about you? To what do I owe the pleasure of your visit?" Fujin replied, "Doing great as well. As for my visit, I wanted to borrow some of your prisoners to test a new jutsu I have been learning." Ibuki was surprised. Though he would get such requests occasionally, they would be very rare. He asked, to what degree the injuries could be, and what would be the chances? Fujin replied casually, "If everything goes well, then there won't be any injury. If things don't go well, then that person would be crippled in the best case, dead in the worst case." "I'd prefer a normal human, though." Ibuki thought a bit and said, "All right. I have a prisoner who was arrested for raping a minor and is supposed to be executed in a few days. You can test your technique out on him. Knowing his past, feel free to cripple him further even if everything goes well." Fujin nodded. Ibuki called a subordinate and asked him to lead Fujin to that prisoner's prison. Ibuki's subordinate led Fujin to the prison and allowed him to enter, leaving him alone with the prisoner. The prisoner was a middle-aged man and in terrible shape. Fujin could see several scars all over his body. Several of his nails were missing. Instead, some of his fingers had nails nailed in them instead of actual nails. His face was entirely swollen. The man looked at Fujin. Terror was visible in his eyes. Yet there was also resignation. He said, "Get on with it. You motherfuckers can't torture me anymore." Fujin chuckled and said, "As an ordinary human, you shouldn't try to estimate what a ninja can or cannot do." Several shadow clones appeared around Fujin. Fujin sat on the ground and weaved hand seals. Spirit transformation, jutsu. Fujin's soul exited his body. The prisoner watched with confusion as he didn't understand why his torturer had begun meditating. He wondered, is this some new style of torture? Suddenly, his eyes widened as he instinctively felt something enter his body. He felt a chill and fear like never before. Yet he didn't understand what was happening. What his eyes couldn't see was that Fujin's soul had already entered his body. Meanwhile, Fujin could clearly see the man's soul. He extended his arm towards the man's soul. Remembering the steps in the scroll, he began using his energy to affect the man's soul. Within a few seconds, his soul fell under Fujin's control. Fujin analyzed, not bad. By controlling his soul, I can control his entire body. Of course, it is this easy because his soul is too weak and has almost no willpower. A rank S ninja's soul will have tremendous willpower. I might not be able to control it so easily. Even more troublesome would be someone who actually trained or strengthened his soul or knows how to use his soul. I shouldn't rely on this technique against Orochimaru. Similarly, I can't use it against a Rinnegan wielder. I'm not too sure about Obito and Zetsu either. Who knows what additional techniques they know? Oh well, time to test it. Fujin quickly took control of the prisoner's body and said in a calm voice, "Release his restraints." One of the clones nodded and removed all the chains and cuffs. Fujin stretched the prisoner's body while analyzing, "My control isn't very smooth. It's more like controlling a puppet. However, I have a feeling that the Yamanaka's secret technique is better at controlling others than this jutsu. That said, this jutsu has other specialities which the Yamanaka technique can't match." Acting on his thoughts, Fujin began suppressing the prisoner's soul. The prisoner, who had lost control of his body, suddenly felt a pain like never before. A soul-wrenching scream exited his throat. If not for the silent seals in the prison, the entire T&I department would have heard his scream. Chapter 564, Naruto's Outburst and Hidden Grass Crisis. Fujin was satisfied with his scream. He thought, this is the main killing method of this jutsu, by suppressing and destroying the soul. The victim will fall dead without any signs of injury on his or her body. If that happens in the middle of the war, armies would be scared and demoralized to see their comrades dying mysteriously in such a manner. Apart from this, There is another technique that makes one of my hard-earned jutsus kind of redundant. Fujin placed his hand on the soul. In an instant, he began reading the memories of the prisoner's soul, seeing everything that he had done in his life. He pulled his hand back while thinking, memories of just this lifetime. Does it mean that this is his first life, or does it mean that ordinarily a soul can only have the memories of just one lifetime? Perhaps something along the lines of memories getting eradicated during the process of reincarnation. Or perhaps the memories of other lifetimes have been hidden somewhere inside the soul to such a degree that this technique can't access them. Regardless, this method is far more efficient than the Yamanaka mind-reading technique. The Yamanaka's technique targets the brain. The memories one can read are only the ones that are fresh in the target's brain. Reading older and suppressed memories or memories that the target has forgotten about is extremely difficult. In addition, damaging the brain could cause the memories to disappear as well. By comparison, reading memories from the soul is extremely convenient. More importantly, it has another fearsome application. I understand why Tabarama developed the base version of this technique. It's to read the memories of the souls summoned with the Edo Tensei Jutsu. Fujin's soul sighed, as the amount of respect he had for Tabarama's research and inventing abilities increased once again. He had just found the perfect solution to a problem he would have to face in the future. Having tested everything he wanted to, Fujin left the prisoner's body and returned to his own. He got up and dispelled his clones after they tied up the prisoner again. The prisoner gradually gained clarity as well. Suddenly, the prisoner felt an extreme pain coming right from his soul. He shrieked and looked at Fujin, who was walking out of the cell, with terror and asked while breathing roughly, "What did you do?" Fujin didn't turn around and disappeared from his line of sight. Only some words lingered in the air. "Just tried a new torture technique to keep you entertained. Enjoy your remaining life." Since Fujin had read all his memories, he knew exactly the kind of scum the guy was, and why Ibiki had asked Fujin to torture him even though he had already been tortured to such an extent. As Fujin shut the door, the screams of the prisoner filled the cell. It'd be several hours before someone would come to check on him and realize that he had been screaming continuously for hours. Fujin analyzed, "The pain he is experiencing is a little injury that I inflicted upon his soul. That said, souls are quite resilient. His injury will heal by itself in a couple of weeks. I suspect that even if I had destroyed his soul, only his physical body would die. As for his soul, it should pass into the afterlife and reform. I guess this can be considered a form of immortality in itself. The only issue is being able to retain memories from one life to another. I should try this on someone after I go out of the village to get a better picture." Busy with his thoughts, Fujin reached Ibiki's office again and asked for a few ninja prisoners to test his jutsu on. Ibiki obliged and had his subordinate guide Fujin to the ninja prisoners. One of those unfortunate prisoners was Mizuki. While Fujin was busy testing the spirit transformation jutsu, Team 7 finally grew sick of the Rank D missions. They had been quiet for some time as they barely had any energy left after Kakashi's brutal training regimen. However, after more than 2 months of such training, Naruto had begun getting used to it while Sasuke was managing to complete the training as well. Sakura improved rapidly too, though she still couldn't complete it. Even so, all 3 genins had grown sick of chasing cats and dogs, babysitting kids and pulling out weeds. The day Naruto's patience finally ended was the same day Tezuna was in Konoha. After Naruto's little outburst, Hiruzen decided to give them a Rank C mission to protect Tezuna. By the time Team 7 left Konoha, Fujin completed testing the spirit transformation jutsu on the ninjas as well. He didn't face any issue other than the fact that the ninjas had more willpower, and he needed slightly more effort to suppress their souls. In addition, their suppressed souls tried taking back control of their bodies non-stop, so Fujin had to actively keep their souls suppressed. Fujin also experimented by letting their souls overcome the suppression to see whether it would have any adverse impact on him. Fortunately, that wasn't the case. At most, his soul felt a force pushing him outside their bodies, but Fujin could resist it with rather ease and suppress the soul once again. Satisfied with his experiments, Fujin returned to his house. Sitting on his sofa, Fujin analyzed, the spirit transformation jutsu can be considered as mastered. I just need some live practice. Regardless, this is another top-tier jutsu mastered, along with Wind Domain, 8 Inner Gates and Flying Thunder God Jutsu. In the last couple of months, my teleporting range has increased significantly as well. I can now teleport up to a distance of 2.3 kilometers, and it is improving at an extremely fast rate. By the time of the invasion, my range should increase to several dozen kilometers. Hopefully, it'll exceed 100 kilometers. That would allow me to carry Karin all the way to Phantom Haven Base and return to Konoha within minutes. In addition, I also had my clones work on improving the control over natural lightning with the help of Kiba blades in Mount Mudeki. The Fuin Battlefield Seal has been created as well. While my clones worked on controlling lightning, they also managed to infuse lightning into the Rasengan, creating a jutsu just as destructive as Rasen Shuriken. With all this out of the way, I guess I can finally start studying medical ninjutsu and poisons. Time to find Yoshi and Isamu. I'm sure they will be delighted to hear the news. I just wonder how long they will stay delighted. Fujin was about to leave his house once again when someone rang his bell. It was one of Hiruzen's Anbu guards, calling Fujin to go to the Hokage's office immediately. Fujin immediately left while wondering what had happened. The Anbu guard stayed outside while only Fujin went inside. To his surprise, Shikaku and the 2 elders were in the room as well. He wondered, for these 3 to be here. Did something happen recently? Hiruzen pushed forward a scroll that was on his desk and said, "Fujin, read this and tell me your thoughts." Puzzled, Fujin just nodded and picked up the scroll. The scroll was from Kusagakyur. Puzzled, Fujin just nodded and picked up the scroll. The scroll was from Kusagakyur, the hidden village in the Land of Grass. As he read the contents, Fujin understood why the 4 of them were together in the office. In the scroll, Kusagakyur stated that they are facing a grave crisis. They were facing a formidable group of rogue ninjas. Several of them were disgruntled Kusa ninjas themselves, and they were conducting attacks on Kusagakyur ninjas and bases all over the Land of Grass. As a result, the village was facing heavy losses. There was even a chance that the hidden village could be attacked, and the recent losses had made them very nervous. As Fujin reached the end of the scroll, he squinted his eyes. A sly smile appeared on his face as he muttered, "Interesting." His smile and the amusement in his voice were immediately noticed by everyone in the room. Koharu asked, "What did you find so amusing about the scroll?" Fujin replied, "It's the demands they have put forth. They have asked us to eliminate the rogue group. However, they have also said that they don't have any money or resources to pay us. At the same time, they are saying that if we don't help them, they might have to take drastic actions to resolve the issue. They are implying that it'll somehow negatively affect us. Considering their strength, the only thing they can do to negatively affect us is ally with Iwagakure. I didn't expect that a minor village would be so aggressive while negotiating with us." Hiruzen nodded. Everyone in the room had realized the same. He said, "Kusagakyur specializes in diplomacy. It is their greatest strength, so that threat isn't a baseless one. They do have the capability to ally with Iwa. Of course, there are obvious issues in doing so." Hiruzen looked at Shikaku as finished speaking. Chapter 565, Fujin the Diplomat. Understanding Hiruzen's intention, Shikaku added, "Though Kusa is good at diplomacy, they can't ally easily with Iwa as their relationship is quite bad currently." Iwa had invaded the Land of Grass in both the Second and the Third Great Ninja Wars. Their people still remember that. Their civilians as well as ninjas hate Iwa for causing so many deaths and putting them through hell. In addition, Iwa had sent their Jinchuriki to the land of grass a couple of years ago. Their relations had deteriorated to the level it was at during the Great Wars after Roshi used the tailed beast bomb on their lands. And these two aren't the biggest issues. The biggest issue is that Iwa is definitely funding and assisting the rogue group that is fighting against Kusagakyure. Though the rogue group likely formed by itself, there is no way that they would become such a threat without Iwa's aid. Even if Kusa decides to overlook this fact and not raise this issue while negotiating with Iwa, Iwa would want both groups to coexist in the land of grass so that they can restrict both sides and control the land of grass. This will cut down Kusa's influence considerably, as the country would have two hidden villages instead of one. It will also give a chance to that rogue group to create a proper army and grow without having to fight Kusagakyure. In the future, they wouldn't need to resort to guerrilla warfare whenever they have to fight Kusagakyure and could confront them head-on. So even with their good diplomacy, it is unlikely for them to get favorable terms by allying with Iwa. Fujin nodded, agreeing with Shikaku's analysis. Hiruzen added, "So in other words, this high-priority message is just Kusagakyure's way to coerce us to do their job for them without getting anything in return." Though Hiruzen talked plainly, Fujin could clearly see that Hiruzen wasn't pleased. He chuckled internally while thinking, it looks like they hit a nerve. That said, this scroll from Kusagakyure is quite ingenious. On the surface, it might seem that they are arrogantly threatening Konoha, a village far stronger than them, by saying that they would ally with Iwa. However, nowhere in the scroll is this explicitly mentioned. If confronted, they can just decline it and say that this isn't what they implied and can give some other examples of what the drastic actions will be. Though it seems that they will offend Konoha by doing so, in truth, there isn't much Konoha can do. The worst we can do is ignore this scroll and decline to help, in which case Kusagakyure doesn't win or lose anything. The status quo will prevail. If we decide to act against them in the dark, then that will be equivalent to jumping on an axe, as that will weaken Kusagakyure and will allow a faction that is supported by Iwa to take power in the land of grass. So, they know that we won't take such a step. Besides, even if we decide not to help, we will still be forced to help if Iwa gets involved directly. No wonder Hiruzen is annoyed. Considering that he didn't take any advantage of the critical situation, I had placed Rasa and pretty much says that he wants to avoid a major war at all costs, even though the village is no longer as weak as during the Hyuga incident. Fujin looked at Hiruzen and said, "They are indeed quite good at diplomacy. Anyway, why did you call me? Are we going to war? Or do you want me to silently make a few people disappear?" From Fujin's perspective, that situation wasn't difficult to handle. Neither side had any rank S ninja. If he wished to, he could eliminate leaders from both sides with relative ease. Even though Kusagakyure's diplomacy was good, that was contingent that Konoha played by the rules. Konoha could just install puppet leaders and take control of both forces forcefully. The only issue it would create is that other major and minor villages would become quite wary of Konoha. However, that was Hiruzen's headache and not Fujin's. Hiruzen smiled and said, "Neither. I want you to lead a diplomatic team to Kusagakyure and negotiate a deal with them. Whether Konoha goes to assist them for free, whether we demand money to do so, how much money we demand, or whether we stay out of it completely will be completely left up to you." Fujin was surprised. Though Fujin had been a part of several negotiation teams over the last couple of years, he had never taken the lead in any discussion. On the contrary, he barely participated in any discussion, valuing his words like gold. Fujin looked at the two elders. To his surprise, neither objected. He thought, it looks like Hiruzen has already made and conveyed his decision. Otherwise, both of them would have opposed doing something so reckless. Fujin thought for a bit and asked, "Are you sure?" Hiruzen nodded while chuckling to himself, finally a moment where he isn't completely sure of himself. Oh well, the boy has got to learn someday, might as well start today. Even if he messes up, it won't cost Konoha much. Fujin asked, "Will I be going alone or will there be any assistance?" Hiruzen answered, "You can take our usual diplomatic team with you. In fact, they are already preparing. In addition, Elder Hamura will join you as well. He will go with you under disguise and won't be participating in the discussions unless you explicitly ask him to. However, you should do that only as a last resort. This mission will be led by you and not him. Whatever is the result of this negotiation, it'll solely be your responsibility." Fujin nodded while thinking, "I guess he really wants me to take this responsibility. Oh well, I might as well do it in the best possible way and entertain myself a bit. Besides, this is a good opportunity to build some reputation. Even though it might not be a good reputation, it might just help me keep some ambitious idiots like Katsuhiro at arm's length," Fujin said. "All right. However, the combat capabilities of our diplomatic team are quite low. Add a couple of Anbu squads to my team and have them disguise themselves as diplomats." Hiruzen nodded and said, "Sure." What he didn't notice was that Shikaku suddenly became slightly nervous when Fujin mentioned combat capabilities. He thought, "Why do I get a feeling that my days will become hectic once again? Sigh, nothing good happens when this boy goes on a mission. I just hope that he doesn't do something too crazy this time." Unfortunately, Shikaku couldn't guess what the crazy thing Fujin would be doing. Hiruzen said, "I have already assembled the diplomatic team. You can join them and plan out your strategy before moving out. Move out by this evening." Fujin nodded. He and Hamura began walking towards the room where the diplomatic discussions would usually be held. En route, Fujin created and dispelled a shadow clone. Hamura immediately realized he sent a message about this meeting to his shadow clones. I wonder what they are doing. It was as Hamura had speculated. Fujin sent a message to his clones that were working on the seal, the clone who was guiding his 5 students, and a couple of clones that he had sent to the training facility to guide other orphans. Fujin had begun sending a few clones to the training facilities whenever he had some chakra to spare so that he could influence the other kids as well. The help he provided them was nowhere near what his students got. He would let Hiruzen's Anbu train them and only occasionally observe them and give some advice to help them improve further. As a result, even though the Anbu instructors did most of the work, the kids were more grateful towards Fujin as he took time from his busy schedule and council duties to guide them. Some Anbu noticed it, but didn't do anything as Fujin outranked them considerably, and he wasn't doing anything harmful to the kids or the village. Besides, Anbu Hiruzen had sent to train the kids were of civilian backgrounds as well because he didn't want to alert the clans about the kids having Kekkei Genkai. So they didn't mind Fujin, who represented the civilian ninjas in the council, increasing his influence. In any case, the message Fujin sent to his clones was to inform his students that he would be out of the village for a few days, and to inform the same to the Anbu captain stationed in his compound. Chapter 566, An Extremely Bad Feeling. Back in the Hokage's office, Koharu asked, "Are you sure about this, Hiruzen? Even though he has done well so far, I still don't think asking him to lead such a mission is a good idea. Fighting and negotiation are 2 entirely different things." Hiruzen shrugged and said, "It's all right. Besides, what's the worst he can do? At max, we will have to help them eliminate that rogue faction for free, and even then, he will be doing most of the work." Hiruzen knew about Fujin's wind domain. While he wasn't entirely sure how strong it was, as Fujin no longer practiced it in the open, the fact that he could steal Sasori's puppets was all Hiruzen needed to know. Even if they had to fight, he was sure Fujin would be able to take care of it without any issue. If Iwa tried interfering, then he could deploy Jiraiya to deter them. Unlike him, the others in the room had different thoughts. Koharu wondered, why does he trust that boy so much? Even though he could kill Juzo, fighting a rogue faction is different from fighting a single ninja. It could cost us several lives, but from the way Hiruzen is speaking, It's as if he is sure that we won't lose any lives. As for Shikaku, his mind was stuck on a few words that Hiruzen spoke. They were, "What's the worst he can do?" For some reason, Shikaku had an extremely bad feeling. Fujin and Hamura entered the room. Immediately, 12 eyes looked at them. There were several papers on the round table, and it looked like they had already been discussing how to handle the negotiation. On seeing the two of them, one of them said, "Elder Hamura, Counselor Fujin, it's good to have you. Elder Hamura, we wanted to ask you a few things." To his surprise, Hamura raised his palm and said, "While I will be joining the mission, I won't be participating in the discussions. Fujin will be the one leading this mission." Immediately, everyone in the room was surprised. They all assumed that Hamura would lead the mission. While they were familiar with Fujin, he barely used to participate in the missions. For a moment, none of them knew what to say. Fujin had expected such a reaction and wasn't particularly offended. In fact, he was surprised as well when Hiruzen informed him that he would be leading this mission. He chuckled to break the silence and asked, "What's with this reaction? Don't worry, I won't mess up too much. Let's start the meeting." His words caused some awkward smiles to appear on their faces. However, it broke the ice, and they finally began the meeting as Fujin and Hamura sat down. Fujin asked, "Did you guys decide on what resources to ask in return for helping them?" One of them answered, "We haven't discussed that much yet." Considering the tone in their letter, our discussion so far was focused more towards what we should say to counter their points when they ask for help free of cost. Another added, "We were also considering letting them owe us the money so that they could repay in the future." Fujin shook his head and said, "They are facing an existential crisis. How would they pay us in the future if they were to be destroyed? Besides, they could take loans from us and ally with Iwa later, or threaten us asking us to forgive the loans, or they would ally with Iwa. No need to consider allowing them to owe us. Just decide on how much money to demand. If they don't have the money, decide what resources to ask for instead, be it precious metals, chakra metal, elemental crystals, or even their land." Fujin's words surprised everyone in the room, including Hamura. One of them countered, "But that won't be right. Their message emphasizes the fact that they won't be able to pay. Focusing on which resources to demand instead of convincing them that they need to pay and giving them some options is like putting the cart before the horse." Another added, "In addition, we need to keep in mind that we have been allied for several decades. Forcing them to pay could create some resentment, undoing the decades of good work. It might also provide Iwa with an opportunity to improve their ties with Kusa, which will increase the risk of them double-crossing us in the future." Fujin chuckled and replied, "The decades of being in an alliance didn't stop them from making a disguised threat about allying with Iwa. Anyway, you don't need to worry. I do have a plan in mind, though I need to finalize the details. Just focus on deciding the resources first. Later, we can focus on thinking about what arguments to give when they say that they can't afford to pay. As for giving them a line of credit, there is no need. If they are serious about paying us, then their daimyo could discuss the same with the fire daimyo." As the leader of this mission, Fujin's word was the final. In addition, the way he said it implied that there was no scope for debate. They looked at Hamura, but he didn't say anything. Hence, they followed his order and began deciding what to ask from them in exchange for helping them. Meanwhile, Hamura analyzed him. He can use authority very well, as expected of someone who was an Anbu captain. Still, he is quite inflexible. During negotiations, being flexible is the most important. Otherwise, both sides could stay at an impasse for years. In this particular case, there wasn't any harm in letting them owe us. In fact, the negotiation should have been about how much they should owe us and what the rate of interest should be. Even Hiruzen would have done this. His inflexibility is disappointing considering how well he analyzed the meetings after Hiruzen was done negotiating. There is a big gap between his analytical and execution skills. I now see why Hiruzen wants to give him some experience in leading diplomatic missions. Fujin glanced at Hamura while paying attention to the discussion. Though Hamura didn't show any expression, Fujin could clearly feel a sense of disappointment from him. He thought, I guess he wanted me to go the normal route and provide them a line of credit. That said, he doesn't have the knowledge of the future. Not too long from now, Konoha and Iwa will be allies. Why would it matter whether Kyusa is allied with us or them? If anything, they'll be scrambling to have closer relations with Konoha. In fact, it doesn't even matter whether Kyusa or the rebels are in power in the Land of Grass. It'll all be the same. As for Iwa, Anoki won't look for a direct confrontation against Konoha. He wouldn't be called the fence-sitter if he jumped headfirst in an unrewarding battle. Besides, Iwa has already lost hand to the Akatsuki. From the information Anbu gathered, Deidara seems to have gone rogue as well. He should have joined Akatsuki by now. So, Anoki will be paying a lot of attention to Akatsuki and their movements. He won't risk a battle with Konoha while Iwa is the weaker side. Due to his knowledge of the future, Fujin didn't have the same considerations as Hamura and others. The group discussed what to ask from Kyusa. When they reached the final amount, Fujin said, that's too little. Even if they gave us normal missions, it would cost 25% more than this value. Increase its overall worth by 25%. Wait. Fujin took a pause before adding, actually, they are in a tough spot, and they are asking us to deploy our forces rapidly. We should charge them a premium considering how badly they need our help. Increase it first by 25% and then increase it by 50% once more. The entire room became silent. No one had any words. Even Hamura was left speechless. Everyone just looked at each other, not knowing what to say. Every single one of them was surprised by Fujin's greediness and shamelessness. Only one person smiled. It was Hiruzen, who was watching through his crystal ball. He cried imaginary tears of happiness while thinking, finally, the village will benefit from his greedy nature. That said, there is no way Kyusa will agree. Though the scroll mentioned that they are in a tough spot, this isn't something that they can't handle. The only thing they truly require from us is our preparedness in case Iwa makes a move. Though Koharu and Hamura were worried, Hiruzen was truly looking forward to how Fujin would handle the negotiations against someone who didn't particularly care for his well-being as Hiruzen did. He had to see whether Fujin's greed would work while negotiating with other villages, or whether it would become an obstacle. Chapter 567, Fujin's Effect. In the meeting room, everyone exchanged glances. Finally, one decided to speak up and said, Counselor Fujin, with all due respect, there is no way that they would agree. Fujin waved his hand dismissively and said, It's fine, we can negotiate. As long as it is above what it would cost them normally, there is no harm in doing the deal. In fact, even if it goes slightly below it, it'll be fine considering that it is a bulk deal. Anyway, finalize the amount soon. We still need to decide on the points to use to make them understand that helping them for free is off the table. That will be the main topic during negotiations. The diplomats sighed in relief as Fujin finally showed some flexibility. They quickly finalized the normal cost and the premium cost for Kyusa to pay. The discussion quickly changed towards how to convince Kyusa to pay, how strict they should be during the negotiation, and when to pull the plug in case Kyusa refused to pay under any circumstances, along with some other points. After discussing all the aspects for a few hours, they finalized all the details. Fujin smiled and said, Good work, everyone. He turned his gaze towards the closed door. The doors automatically opened and he said, You guys can enter. 2 Anbu squads entered. They were dispatched by Hiruzen to assist Fujin. Fujin looked at them and asked, Did Lord Hokage inform you about the mission? One of the Anbu captains answered, He provided us with some details. He said that we have to ensure your group's safety while you are negotiating with Kusagakyure. Fujin nodded and said, Yes. However, all of you will follow us in disguise. You will pretend to be diplomats, but you don't need to speak during any discussions. Fujin's words confused the diplomats and Hamura once again. For the first time, Hamura said, Fujin, everyone knows who our diplomats are. While having 1 or 2 more diplomats won't be suspicious, having 8 new diplomats will easily arouse suspicion. It'll be better to have them follow us in their Anbu uniform as Kyusa won't stop them. Fujin replied with a smile, I know it'll be suspicious, but that's fine. I want them to be suspicious. Fujin looked at 4 diplomats and pointed at them one by one and said, You 4 won't speak anything during the meeting as well. Just pay attention to the meeting, but don't speak unless I ask any of you to. The group were puzzled even more. None of the diplomats understood what Fujin's intentions were. Hamura wondered, why does it feel like he is going there to fight instead of negotiating? Even if our negotiations don't result in anything, Kyusa won't dare to attack us. What exactly is he planning? Not providing any explanation, Fujin said, We will move out in an hour. Settle your matters if you have any and return to this room in less than an hour. Everyone nodded. Some left, some stayed there. After an hour, the group left Konoha. They traveled the night and the following day before waiting in one of the patrol camps the entire night. Before the sun appeared in the sky, their group entered the land of grass and moved towards Kusagakyur. A few hours later, the group reached Kusagakyur. They had already sent a message informing Kusagakyur about their arrival. As a result, the leader of Kusagakyur and other prominent leaders were waiting for their arrival. When the Konoha ninjas appeared in their sight, the face of every single person fell. When the Konoha ninjas appeared in their sight, the face of every single person fell without any exception. Their leader cursed, Damn Konoha, where are the Hokage or other elders? And why is that cursed brat leading the group? Kusagakyur wasn't informed who'd be leading the diplomatic team. On seeing that it was the guy who was rumored to have cut down several of their ninjas, everyone became very alert. Fujin appeared in front of the leader of Kusagakyur and said, Ashikaga Hiroshi-san, it's good to see you once again. Ashikaga Hiroshi faked a smile and said, It's good to see you as well, Suzuki Fujin. Fujin nodded and said, Let's not waste any time. Considering your current situation, let's get down to business right away. Hiroshi nodded. While he would have engaged in small talk with Hiruzen or the other 2 elders, he didn't have anything to bond with Fujin due to their vast age gap. They quickly entered the central mansion and entered the meeting room. During that time, Hiroshi properly observed everyone from Konoha's diplomatic team. He became even more serious as he analyzed 9 new faces. They are likely hiding their real identity using transformation jutsu. Something is off. 9 ninjas hiding themselves and sending this crazy kid instead of a normal elder. We need to be careful. The others from Kyusa noticed the same thing as well. Without saying anything, everyone became very tense, and the Konoha ninjas and diplomats noticed how tense they were. Hamura glanced at Fujin and wondered, is this what he wanted? Making them negotiate while they are under tension. That said, it doesn't explain why they are so tense. Even when Hiruzen shows up openly with his Anbu guards, they aren't this tense. As everyone took their seats, a few servants appeared in the room carrying trays of food. However, Fujin said, Let's leave the food for later and begin the discussion. His words caused the Kyusa higher-ups to frown. Hiroshi realized he doesn't trust us. Why did Konoha become so suspicious of us? Even though we hinted at a lot of things in the scroll, our relationship is still very good. This isn't the Hokage style. What they didn't notice was that the diplomats from Konoha's side also glanced at Fujin with eyes full of complaints. Fujin had made them run all morning without any break. They didn't complain as they would have got delicious food in Kusagakyur. However, Fujin denied them that as well. Though they understood the reason why Fujin did so, none of them were worried about the food being poisoned or drugged. Even if Kyusa decided to betray Konoha and ally with Iwa, they would never do something like that, as it'll only result in their annihilation. As for the Anbu disguised among the diplomats, none of them had any complaints. After all, they were used to such situations as compared to the diplomats who had long stopped being an active ninja. Hiroshi nodded and said, All right. He glanced at the servants who immediately left the room. Once all the doors were shut, Fujin said, "Though the scroll gave some details, we are still not exactly aware of the strength and numbers of your enemy and the scale of losses you have suffered. Fill me in on it, and also tell me any other details you have about the rebels." Hiroshi nodded. The person sitting to his left began explaining the details about the rogue faction which was attacking them, while Fujin was negotiating in Kusagakyure. Another interesting clash was happening on the other side of the Land of Fire. En route to the Wave Country, Kakashi and his squad were attacked by Mamachi Zabuza, the demon of the mist and the current wielder of Kubikirabacho. Just like in the original story, Zabuza trapped Kakashi in the water prison jutsu, putting his team in extreme danger. Zabuza's water clone had already sent both Naruto and Sasuke flying, showing them the vast difference that existed between genins and elite jounins. Understanding their terrible situation, Kakashi shouted, "Everyone listen, take Tazuna and retreat. It's a fight you can't win. If he wants to hold me in this water prison, he can't leave this place. He won't be able to hurt me through the water prison either." Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura were very tense when they heard Kakashi's words. Suddenly, a look of surprise appeared on Naruto's face as Kakashi's words stuck in his mind. He quickly got up and weaved hand signs while shouting, "Sensei, are you sure he can't hurt you inside the water prison?" His sudden question surprised everyone. Kakashi thought, "Well, he can, but if I say that, you guys won't retreat." He quickly shouted, "Yes, he can't. Now retreat." A grin formed on Naruto's face as he said, "Good, then I don't have to worry. Multi-shadow clone jutsu." In an instant, a few dozen shadow clones formed around Naruto. Seeing that Naruto was still intending to fight, Kakashi cursed, "Darn it. Wah. Is he planning that tactic? It could work. However, it is still very risky." Seeing Naruto and his clones put their hands in their ninja pouch to grab a kunai, memories of the graduation exam resurfaced in Kakashi's mind. Even so, he maintained a worried expression on his face. "Ha ha. Ha 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 ha." Seeing Naruto planning on attacking him, Zabuza's water clone began laughing. His laugh immediately offended Naruto, who wondered, "Why is he laughing like a lunatic?" Zabuza's clone said, "Apparently you don't care whether you get any old." Suddenly, his eyes widened. Hanging around Fujin and falling prey to his sudden attacks without caring whether he was ready or not had an effect on Naruto. He didn't bother waiting for Zabuza to be done with his speech. At the same time, Naruto and each of his shadow clones launched several kunai. Each of the kunai had an explosive tag attached to them. Chapter 568, The Negotiations Start. Zabuza's clone watched as several hundred kunai with explosive tags moved towards him. He immediately weaved hand signs. Water release, water wall jutsu. Immediately a water wall appeared in front of him. Around 20% of the kunai hit the water wall and exploded. The remaining 80% moved towards Zabuza's main body, which was watching over Kakashi. The eyes of both jounins were wide. Kakashi worriedly looked towards Zabuza and thought, "I never imagined that someday I'd be hoping that my enemy keeps me protected. Luckily, he is quite strong. Otherwise, I might lose a layer of my skin." Zabuza was no longer relaxed as well. He weaved hand seals with just his left hand and created a few more water clones who immediately used water wall jutsu to stop the incoming kunai. The kunai hit the water walls and exploded. Though every water wall collapsed, the explosions were stopped. Unfortunately, Zabuza and his clones were left dumbfounded as Naruto followed up with several more rounds of kunai while thinking, "Luckily, Fujin gave me a few hundred explosive tags. Otherwise, we would have no way of fighting against him." Seeing Naruto continuously throwing explosive tags, Sakura shouted, "Naruto, be careful. Don't hurt Kakashi-sensei." Meanwhile, Sasuke thought this isn't enough. Though Zabuza looks under pressure, he is able to defend against the explosions. We need something more. But what? Sasuke saw another set of the water walls collapsing under another round of explosions. His eyes widened as he saw an opportunity. Meanwhile, Zabuza's water clone wondered, How many explosive tags does this damn brat have? How freaking rich is Konoha to give such a little brat so many explosive tags? I can't let this continue. Otherwise, Kakashi will take advantage of the situation. Even though the water prison jutsu was good at trapping people, it didn't mean that it couldn't be broken from the inside. If Naruto kept Zabuza's attention on him, Kakashi could break through even if Zabuza didn't take his hand off. After blocking the next round of explosions, the water clone moved forward at a rapid speed towards the place where Naruto's original body initially was. A few shadow clones tried to stop him but were cut apart by his large blade. He swung Kubikirabacho at Naruto, who quickly used his kunai and barely managed to block the blade. Unfortunately, the water clone quickly followed with a kick, knocking the kunai off his hand and sending him flying backwards for a few meters. In the blink of an eye, he appeared on top of Naruto and said, "You did well. Unfortunately, your journey ends here." Seeing Zabuza's clone about to kill Naruto, Sakura, Sasuke, and Tazuna became very worried. To everyone's surprise, Naruto grinned and said, "I said that I would become a great ninja and become the Hokage. Nothing will stop me until then." "That's my ninja way." Zabuza's clone felt something odd. He immediately slashed Naruto, only for him to dissipate in a cloud of smoke. At the very instant, several explosive tags exploded right behind him, dispelling the water clone along with several of Naruto's clones. Seeing that it was just a clone, Sakura and Sasuke sighed in relief. Sakura looked in surprise while wondering, since when did Naruto become so smart and strong? Sasuke merely smirked and grabbed a couple of Fuma shurikens. He waited for a few seconds before throwing them. Under the strain of the explosions, another set of water walls collapsed. Zabuza's water clones created another set of water walls. However, before they could form, Sasuke's Fuma shuriken moved through the area and flew straight at Zabuza. He had timed his shuriken perfectly to take advantage of the opening Naruto's explosions created. Seeing it, Naruto, who was hiding among his clones, thought, "Nice, Sasuke. I might not need to do the next step after all." Naruto and some of his clones were weaving hand signs, taking advantage of the chaos created by the explosions. Zabuza grabbed the Fuma shuriken in his left hand before noticing another Fuma shuriken in its shadow. He jumped to avoid it as well, making Sasuke frown. Sasuke glanced towards Naruto, hoping he'd follow up. Fortunately, Naruto and his clones acted immediately. For once, they didn't shout the name of the jutsus. Wind Release, Wind Levitation Jutsu Wind Release, Projectile Control Jutsu. One of Naruto's clones took control of the Fuma shuriken Zabuza had dodged. The Fuma shuriken curved in the air and moved towards Zabuza again from the back, attracting his attention. As for the other clones, they controlled the pieces of broken kunai that were floating on the water by first making them levitate and then controlling them with the projectile control jutsu. Suddenly, several sharp shards of kunai began moving towards Zabuza at a high speed. His clones, who were still focused on blocking the kunai with explosive tags, and Zabuza, who was looking towards the Fuma shuriken, were all caught off guard. Not having enough time, Zabuza let go of the water prison and flickered away. Zabuza appeared a sufficient distance away from the area overrun by explosions and shrapnels. He looked at Naruto's shadow clones in rage and began weaving hand signs while cursing, "That little runt." Unfortunately for Zabuza, Kakashi had broken free. In the blink of an eye, Kakashi dispelled his water clones and directly confronted Zabuza. Just like in the original story, Zabuza would be defeated by Kakashi before being killed by Haku. Back in Kusagakure, they informed the Konoha ninjas majority of the details regarding the rogue faction targeting them. Fujin analyzed him. It looks like just a normal faction. Akatsuki isn't involved. Since Iwa is supporting the rebel faction, I doubt Anoki will employ Akatsuki as they have captured Han. Even if the rebel faction employs Akatsuki, they won't directly target Kusagakure as it'll draw too much attention. Not to mention, it didn't happen in the original story either. Hiroshi looked at Fujin and asked, "So, how much aid can Konoha provide us?" Fujin smiled and replied, "Well, that will depend on what you can afford." Hiroshi wasn't surprised. He never expected Konoha to help them for free without saying a word. No one in Kusagakure did. Everyone in the room from their side was extremely well prepared to argue and convince Konoha to help them for free. Immediately, one of their leaders sighed. He put up an extremely pitiful expression and said, "As we said in our message, our finances are completely stretched thin due to the war. The rebels have killed dozens of our ninjas. Hundreds are injured. Several towns and villages have been destroyed as well. We have to relocate the people from those towns and villages and arrange for their shelter and food along with treating them as well. So, there is no way for us to pay you right now." He said it in a way to invoke maximum sympathy from the other side. Fortunately, he said it in a way to invoke maximum sympathy from the other side. Fortunately, everyone on Fujin's side was an experienced negotiator as well. None were fazed by his act. While they were sympathetic about their situation while discussing it with Fujin, there was no room for emotions during actual negotiations. One of the diplomats on Fujin's side said, "While I sympathize with your situation, we can't provide help without getting anything in return. As much as we would like to help you, do understand the situation from our side as well. We can't ask our ninjas to come and risk their lives here without getting anything in return. Every dead ninja's family has to be compensated. Similarly, everyone who gets crippled has to be paid a pension. The morale of our ninjas will be very low and they might even refuse to join if they aren't paid." Another person from the Kusagakure camp argued back, "We understand your situation. However, Konoha is the richest village. I'm sure you can afford to bear those expenses." A second person from Fujin's side responded with a sigh, "Actually, Konoha's finances are spread very thin as well. Even our forces are spread thin. We have to continuously send our ninjas to the surrounding countries to deter the other major villages from doing anything to harm you. We also had to deal with many rogue ninjas from Kiri, which strained our finances further." A third person quickly added, "In fact, we sent ninjas to the land of grass several times as well even though you didn't pay us. Lord Hawkage had even sent Hatake Kakashi, the son of the White Fang, a few months ago to deter Iwagakure. Lord Hawkage is magnanimous enough to not ask for any payments for those missions. So we should discuss the payments you will need to make to get our help." He was immediately countered by another person from the Kusagakure camp. The discussion went on in this manner. Neither Fujin nor Hiroshi spoke and let others do the negotiating. They just looked at each other. As time passed, Hiroshi became more suspicious as he noticed that 4 of the usual diplomats in Fujin's team weren't speaking at all. All work was done by the 8 diplomats. He wondered, is someone impersonating them? Also, Konoha is awfully stubborn today. We were prepared to owe them a small amount, but they haven't even brought up the matter of loans until now. For 3 hours, the two sides negotiated. Konoha diplomats kept attempting to start discussing how much Kusagakure would have to pay to get Konoha's help. But Kusagakure's leaders never began that discussion and instead kept arguing that Konoha could afford to help them for free. Finally, Fujin said, "Hiroshi-san, it doesn't seem like you guys actually want a deal." A faint smile could be seen on Fujin's face, a smile that made Hiroshi very nervous. Chapter 569, 4 Choices. Hiroshi became slightly nervous on seeing the faint smile on Fujin's lips. While Konoha had a good negotiating team, the negotiations usually used to be very straightforward, and Konoha would rarely use the threat of using force as that wasn't Hiruzen's style. If Hiruzen ever wanted to use force during diplomacy, he'd send Danzo to make a move in the dark. However, there were too many suspicious things during this meeting. The first was the fact that there wasn't any elder in the diplomatic team. The second was the fact that Fujin was leading the team. The third suspicious thing was the 9 new faces. And probably the most suspicious thing was that as many as 13 members of Fujin's team hadn't said a word since the meeting began. Due to these four factors, Hiroshi had been on edge. He thought, even though a lot of things are very suspicious, Konoha has a reputation to maintain. This should just be a pressure tactic. If they wanted to make a move, they wouldn't have sent a diplomatic team here. We can't show weakness. Hiroshi replied, we are serious, Fujin-kun. Though I feel ashamed to say this, it is true that we can't afford to pay anything right now. His words immediately attracted the attention of Hamura and the other diplomats on Fujin's team. Hamura thought, right now. It seems like he is agreeing to owe us money, not bad. It looks like Fujin's tactic of applying pressure is a success. However, it'll only be a success if he takes a step back and accepts this offer. The leaders on Kusagakure's side understood it as well. In truth, they had all decided to resist as much as they could. However, they were nervous due to those 4 points just like Hiroshi. As a result, no one opposed. Everyone's eyes were on Fujin. Fujin's smile faded away as he shook his head and responded, that is impossible. Irrespective of the fact whether we can afford to do so or not, we aren't running a charity. Nor is this situation something you guys can't handle by yourselves. I wanted to discuss the costs for various degrees of cooperation that you might require from us. Unfortunately, you guys have done everything you can to not even begin that discussion for the last 3 hours. From the way you are going, it seems that won't change even if we negotiate for an entire week. Everyone's eyes were glued to Fujin. Though no one said anything or showed it on their face, everyone was blaming him for their current situation. After all, had he been a bit flexible, the deadlock could have been resolved. Fujin continued, so, we will end the negotiations here. Instead, I'll present you the 4 choices that Kusagakure has for the time being. I don't care which one you choose, nor will I debate about it with you. You can choose whichever you want as per your free will and what you think would be the best for Kusagakure. Everyone, including the Konoha ninjas, was surprised by Fujin's words. Despite having been in several negotiations, they had rarely seen something like that. At the very least, no one had seen such a development on day 1 of negotiations. Hamura watched curiously to see what Fujin was up to. Hiroshi asked, so, what are the 4 choices? Fujin pulled out a scroll and passed it to Hiroshi. As Hiroshi opened it to read, Fujin raised his right arm slightly and raised his index finger. He said, since you guys don't want to discuss different levels of cooperation, the help we will give you will either be complete or nothing. Your first choice is to ask for our help. We will annihilate the rebel faction entirely. However, you will have to pay the cost mentioned in the scroll to get us to help you, and the payment will have to be made before we make our move. The Kusagakure leaders subconsciously rejected this choice. No one said anything and only looked at Hiroshi, whose expression became grimmer the more he read from the scroll. He looked at Fujin and asked with a hint of anger in his voice, is this supposed to be a joke? Fujin plainly replied, I am afraid not. Hiroshi replied, this choice is unacceptable to us. Fujin replied, suit yourself. However, if you ask for our help at any time in the future, this will be the cost you'll have to pay for requesting our aid. It won't decrease even if you deal with some of the rebels yourselves. Anyway, Fujin raised his second finger and added, your second choice is to fight the rebels by yourselves. If you don't choose the first option, then Konoha will completely stay out of this conflict. We will only interfere if Iwa makes a direct move against Kusagakure as per our current treaty. Hiroshi nodded. This was an acceptable option to them. Hiroshi asked, what is the third choice? A smile appeared on Fujin's face once again as he raised his third finger. He said, your third option is to put the disguised threat in your message to Konoha into action. You could betray us and ally with Iwa, alleviating your current situation. Fujin's words shocked everyone in the room. For the first time, everyone showed their true feelings on their face. Even Hamura looked at Fujin with widened eyes wondering, what the hell is he planning? Kusagakure camp became nervous as well. None of them expected Konoha to directly call out their threat. Before anyone could say anything, Fujin continued in a casual tone, in which case, I'll kill all of you right here, right now." Those words were the last straw. Everyone in the room freaked out. The Kusagakure ninjas jumped out of their seats. The Konoha diplomats were shaking as well. They hadn't fought against another ninja for years. None of them were ready to fight. The Anbu became very serious as well. Their job had just become 1,000 times more difficult. The one who was the most dumbfounded was Hamura. It had been decades since he retired from active duty. Even though he was still as strong as an elite jounin, he became nervous in that situation as well. He cursed, "Damn you, Hiruzen. You never said that this boy was a lunatic. In my younger days, I could have fought my way out of this village. But in my current state, that will be extremely difficult. What is Fujin doing threatening them in their own village? We have only 22 ninjas, they have over a couple of thousand ninjas." As Hamura expected, most Kyusa ninjas drew out their weapons. In response, Konoha ninjas, except Fujin and Hamura, did so as well. However, none of them actually made any move. Instead, the Kyusa leaders began cursing aggressively. "You dare to threaten us in our own village. Even though we are a minor village, Konoha can't look down on us. Do you think you can make it out alive if you attack us? Since when did Konoha become so arrogant?" Several more such statements were made, making the Konoha diplomats very tense. However, Hamura became slightly relaxed and puzzled as he noticed two things. He thought, "That's weird. Even though they are showing an aggressive front, not one of them has any intention of attacking. I can understand that they will refrain from attacking as it'll bring Konoha's retaliation, but it is almost like they are scared of attacking." What's even more peculiar is that none of them launched any personal insults at Fujin despite his open threat. It was as Hamura observed. Not a single person had any intention of attacking, and not a single one wanted to stand out in front of Fujin. While the spectral swordsman was only a myth and a rumor in Konoha, no one in Kusagakure had forgotten about him despite Fujin not being very active for over a year. They knew that whoever attacked first would lose their life. Even if they somehow managed to kill him eventually, none of them wanted to be a sacrifice for others. Similarly, they knew the spectral swordsman's reputation. None of them wanted to be hunted down by Fujin after the meeting ended. They had no confidence in surviving if Fujin decided to hunt them later. Sitting calmly in his chair, Fujin asked plainly, "So, should I assume that you are making this choice?" Hiroshi immediately said, "Everyone, calm down and return to your seats." He looked at Fujin and replied, "Please don't joke around. Konohagakure and Kusagakure have been allies since the end of the First Great Ninja War. We have no intention of changing that. There wasn't any hidden threat in the scroll either. I'm afraid that you might have misinterpreted it. Can you tell us what our fourth choice is?" Fujin nodded and answered in the same casual tone while raising his fourth finger. "Sure, your fourth option is to lie to me and ally with Iwagakure after we leave. In that case, I'll return later and assassinate every one of you and kill every single person living in your houses." Chapter 570, Kusagakure prepares for a war. The room was left speechless yet again. Even when Kusagakure leaders had taken a step back, Fujin threatened them once more. It was so strange that the Kyusa leaders were confused about whether they should put up a strong face again or just sit in their chairs. In the end, no one got up. Even the Konoha side was weirded out by the situation. Finally, Hiroshi replied, "You can rest assured that we won't be betraying Konoha." Fujin nodded and said, "That's good." He smiled and added, "We would hate to see such a long-standing alliance getting broken as well." Hearing that, everyone on Kusagakure's side cursed him internally. All of Fujin's actions made them think that he wanted a fight instead of a peaceful negotiation. Yet, he shamelessly claimed that he wanted to preserve their alliance. Fujin got up and said, "Let's conclude the meeting. I have already informed you what the cost would be to ask for our help, and that cost won't decrease in the future. If you change your mind in the future and decide to ask for our help, you can send a message to Lord Hawkage." Seeing that Fujin was prepared to leave, Hiroshi asked, "Why not wait for some time and experience our hospitality?" As offended as he was by Fujin's attitude, he understood that he couldn't make Konoha too upset. In addition, if someone like Fujin stayed in Kusagakyur for a few days, it would send a message to the rebels and could make them tone down their aggression. It could even make Iwa back off. Fujin understood his thoughts. However, why would he do something like that? He smiled and replied, "Some other day for sure, Hiroshi-san. I have to return to the village quickly. The world is too tumultuous right now. I'm sure you understand it the best." Hiroshi sighed and said, "That's a shame. All right, we will show you our hospitality some other day." Fujin nodded and turned around. The Konoha ninjas got up and followed him. Within a few minutes, the group left Kusagakyur. Back in the meeting room, there was a total silence. Seeing that no one was leaving the room, the ninjas, who were overlooking the security, assumed that they wanted to discuss among themselves and closed the door. As soon as the door closed, curses were heard inside the room. "That fucking bastard! Konoha crossed all limits today. That brat is too damn arrogant. I wish I could cut him down right in this room. How dare they treat us in this manner? Hiroshi-sama, we need to make Konoha pay for humiliating us in our own village." Hiroshi looked at the person who said that and asked, "What do you recommend we do?" That man went silent. However, one impatient youngster replied, "Let's carry out that threat and ally with Iwagakure. We will prepare a trap for Suzuki Fujin with their help and eliminate him when he tries to carry out his threat." Hiroshi shook his head and said, "Don't forget that the ones supporting the rebels are Iwagakure. If we try to negotiate with them now, we will be in a weaker position. They will force us to accept the existence of the rebel faction and might also use us as cannon fodder in the next great war. It might spell our doom." An old man added, "Besides, even with Iwa's help, there is no guarantee that we will be able to kill Suzuki Fujin. His bounty was actually put up by Iwa. In addition, the rumors about him being the spectral swordsman also came from Iwa. For the Tsuchikage to put up such a large bounty, Iwa should have suffered heavily at his hands. And that something can't be his fight against Roshi, as Iwa put the bounty several months later. From my sources in the land of Waterfall, some Konoha Anbu ninjas had clashed with some Iwa ninjas in that country. My sources said that even Kitsuchi was involved. I believe that Anbu unit was led by Suzuki Fujin, and that clash should have caused heavy losses to Iwagakure despite Kitsuchi's presence. Considering that Suzuki Fujin is still alive and well, Iwa has failed to do anything to him even after placing that huge bounty. If we ally with Iwa and fail to kill him, our ninjas will suffer heavily. And that isn't even considering what will happen if he doesn't make a direct move on our village and instead begins hunting down our ninjas after they leave the village. The losses we are facing right now will be nothing compared to what we will face then." His wise words made the room calm down. Though they were still angry at Fujin, they understood that acting rashly could spell their doom. One person sighed and said, "This doesn't feel good. Despite being insulted in such a manner, all we can do is swallow our pride and endure the humiliation." Hiroshi said, "There is no choice. This is the reason why we focus on diplomacy. Even though we have experienced a peaceful decade, don't forget the difference in strength between us and the major villages. That said, not everything that happened in this meeting was bad. While we messed up a bit by threatening Konoha in this way, we now have a clear picture of their attitude." He took a pause and looked at everyone in the room before continuing. "Their stance can be explained in 3 points. Firstly, they won't help us in dealing with the rebels for free. Instead, they will charge us a premium for saving us. If we fall into a difficult position in the future, we could request their help even though it'll cost us an arm. However, that is better than losing the entire body. Secondly, they will help us if Iwa attacks us directly. In that case, it will become an all-out war between Konoha and Iwa. Things might even escalate further. In the worst case, the Fourth Great Ninja War might start. However, I don't think either Konoha or Iwa want that to happen. So things might not escalate much. Thirdly, if we ally with Iwa, then Konoha will go all out to target us. Even with Iwa's help, that isn't something we can endure. We can't consider this option unless Konoha takes heavy losses and becomes much weaker. Everyone in the room nodded. The old man who spoke earlier said, though his words were humiliating and we were refused any free or cheap help, the situation isn't bad. We can deal with the rebels ourselves, so we don't need to consider whatever Konoha wants to charge us for help. It's just that our losses will be significant. Hiroshi nodded and added, yes. But since we don't need to worry about Iwa's interference, we can finally stop being on the defensive and begin our counterattack. I want to see how much unity they show once their losses start mounting. He got up and looked at everyone in the room. Making eye contact with everyone, he said, I know that none of us have deployed all our forces until today due to our worries. However, from this moment onwards, we will be focusing entirely on this war. No more holding back. It's time to eliminate those fucking traitors. Hiroshi's words had the intended effect. Everyone in the room began making plans for their counterattack. As the Konoha group left Kusagakure, Hamura looked at Fujin. By that moment, he had analyzed everything that had happened in the meeting. He thought, the spectral swordsman. I almost forgot that he was called that when he was in the Anbu. I never imagined that he would have such a deterrence effect in the minor villages. None of them had any intention of fighting him. Even though they tried to hide their emotions, fear was visible even in Hiroshi's eyes when Fujin said that he would hunt them down later. It seems that Koharu and I underestimated his reputation. However, Hiruzen should know it very well. Is this the reason why he insisted upon training him to become a negotiator? The others from Konoha had their thoughts as well. The ones from Anbu had worked with Fujin earlier. As a result, they weren't too surprised with the effect he had. However, seeing the Kusagakure leadership being so afraid of him increased their respect for him. As for the diplomats, they were still full of complaints. They suffered several panic attacks once Fujin started speaking. One of them asked, did we need to be so harsh? It could hurt their ego and push them towards Iwagakure. Due to your open threat, they might even do so in the dark. Fujin replied, if they want to do so in the dark, then there was nothing stopping them earlier either. It's better to just deter them right now instead of hoping that our goodwill moves them. Besides, Chapter 571, Changing Konoha's Image, Fujin took a pause of half a minute as they continued moving forward. Even Hamura became curious to know what Fujin was intending to say. His eyes widened when he finally heard Fujin's words. Fujin continued, besides, which village has helped out another village in such a huge matter for free? Their demand was completely unreasonable in the first place, and the tone of their letter implied that Konoha was weak. It's not surprising for other villages to think that. After all, we suffered innumerable losses post the Third Great Ninja War. The Kubai assault and the Uchiha massacre caused grave losses to our combat power. On the other hand, our diplomatic potential took a great hit due to the Hyuga incident. Even though we were recovering, the recent massive attack in the middle of our village, where we failed to even identify the culprit, caused another blow to Konoha's image. These losses have changed the perception that other villages had towards Konoha and might make them think that it is easy to push us around. While we can't stop them from thinking in this manner, it is important to let them know how bad the consequences will be if they act while thinking along those lines. Fujin's words surprised the diplomats and Hamura. All of them were aware that Konoha's diplomatic powers had waned drastically after Minato's death. They had to keep it in mind while negotiating. It was after a long time that someone had negotiated like Konoha was still the strongest village. Even so, not everyone agreed with his viewpoint. One of the diplomats immediately argued, while I understand your point of view, it is the truth that we are no longer as strong as we once were. Even though Lord Hawkage has done a lot, we are still far from our peak strength. If we go to war with Iwa now, we will be in a very difficult spot. Fujin chuckled and said, true, but that is if we go to war with Iwa. Don't worry, it was the first thing I considered when Lord Hawkage gave me this mission. There is no chance that Iwa would act unless we show that we are weak. Some of the diplomats agreed with Fujin's confidence due to Anoki's reputation. Some were still doubtful, but didn't say anything as there wasn't any point in doing so. Fujin had already threatened Kyusa, and there was nothing anyone could do to reverse that. If anything went wrong, Fujin would be the one to shoulder the responsibility. Only Hamura was stuck in deep thought as he analyzed Fujin's words. After thinking for a while, he muttered to himself, "I now see what you were aiming for, Hiruzen. You wanted to use him to change Konoha's perception in the eyes of other countries. From a gentle and patient image that we were forced to project to a fierce one, indicating that our weak phase has already passed. As long as this matter plays out properly, Fujin will become the face of our negotiation team whenever we have to make tough decisions. He is already a rank S ninja. Once he grows older and stronger, he could even negotiate with other cages on equal grounds." Hamura glanced towards Fujin and couldn't help but wonder, "Are you planning to raise him as your next successor, Hiruzen?" Hamura didn't voice out his thoughts. The group continued their journey towards Konoha. In the land of waves, Kakashi's eyes snapped open and he immediately sat upright. In the land of waves, Kakashi's eyes snapped open and he immediately sat upright, scaring Naruto and Sakura who were trying to peek under his mask. Kakashi didn't pay any attention to their antics and thought, "What's this odd feeling? I know that Zabuza is dead, but I can't shake the feeling that I've overlooked something. Something big." Kakashi's brain went into overdrive as he recalled and analyzed his clash against Zabuza. Very soon, he realized the peculiarities in the Hunter Nin's actions. He quickly speculated, "Zabuza is most probably still alive." His words shocked everyone in the room. He explained to them his analysis, causing Naruto, Sakura, and Tazuna to freak out. They only calmed down after Kakashi informed them that Zabuza wouldn't be able to move around for over a week. Or rather, the other two calmed down. Naruto, on the other hand, became excited at the prospect of facing Zabuza once again. Kakashi informed the group that they would prepare, which made Sakura inquire how he would do so when he couldn't even move due to having overused his Sharingan. Kakashi answered, "I can't move much, but you three can. I will conduct a special training session for you three to prepare you for the battle." Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura shivered on hearing Kakashi's words. They were still very fearful of the training Kakashi was putting them through, and now he was saying that the training session would be even more special. Sakura complained, "Sensei, we won't be able to fight if our bodies are aching and we don't have any energy." At the same time, her inner self cursed, "Do you want to kill me, old man? Why don't you know the difference between training and torture?" Naruto and Sasuke didn't say anything but silently agreed with her. Kakashi looked at the trio and said, "Don't worry, you three will like this training." The three genins doubted their sensei's words. Unfortunately, they didn't have any other option and could only hope that it was true. None of them wanted to face Zabuza when every single muscle in their body was aching. The next morning, Team 7 had assembled in the woods near Tazuna's house. Naruto asked, half in excitement and half in fear, "Sensei, what will our special training be?" Kakashi explained, "We don't have a lot of time to train, so I can't teach you something entirely new. Hence, we will focus on increasing your chakra control. We will do so by climbing trees." Sakura wondered, climbing trees. How will that be training? At the same time, Naruto's eyes widened, climbing trees. Does he mean the same exercise that Fujin taught me? Kakashi observed Naruto's reaction and thought, Fujin seems to have already taught Naruto this. I have seen him walk a bit on walls while chasing that cat. However, his chakra control is still quite bad. I guess I'll teach him water walking, Kakashi said. This won't be normal tree climbing. You'll do it without using your hands. Watch and learn. In front of the three genins, Kakashi walked up a tree, causing Sakura and Sasuke to be surprised. On the other hand, Naruto felt excited as he already knew it. Sakura asked, "But Kakashi-sensei, how will climbing trees in this way make us stronger?" Kakashi explained to the trio about chakra control and also informed them about how it could help them build their stamina. Naruto listened carefully, as well as he didn't know about it either, as Fujin didn't bother wasting his time doing something as meaningless as teaching theory to Naruto. Naruto realized, so this is why Fujin made me learn this and water walking. Kakashi added, the only way you can learn this is by doing it. Use the kunai blades to mark your progress. Naruto didn't bother picking a kunai and instead claimed loudly, I already know this, Kakashi-sensei. His words surprised Sakura and Sasuke. Though Naruto had used this skill at times, he had used it for extremely short durations as none of the Rank D missions required that skill in particular. As a result, neither of them had noticed it. Naruto immediately ran up the tree and said, see, I told you. Big brother Fujin already taught me this when I was in the academy. He, Sasuke and Sakura were surprised once again. Neither expected Naruto to do something that would look so cool. Sakura's inner self shouted, since when did Naruto become this cool? Even my Sasuke-kun seems a bit upset. Meanwhile, Sasuke frowned and asked softly, who is this Fujin that he keeps talking about every time? Though Naruto mentioned Fujin's name several times, neither Sakura nor Sasuke had paid much attention to him. It was only when he learnt that Fujin had taught Naruto this technique that Sasuke became interested in knowing about him. Sakura looked at Sasuke and said, I am not sure. I never heard anyone other than Naruto speaking about him. Chapter 572, Who is Fujin? Kakashi got down from the tree while saying, Suzuki Fujin. He is one of the few elite jounins in Konoha, the same rank as me. He isn't particularly famous as most of the missions he did were undercover missions. However, there is no doubt that he is one of the strongest ninjas in the world. Sakura, you in particular need to know about him as he is the one who represents the civilian ninjas in Konoha's council. If you face any political issues, then he is the one you need to approach. Sakura and Sasuke were surprised. Sakura's inner self screamed, what the hell is going on? First, we learn how impressive the old Hokage is. Then Zabuza said how cool Kakashi-sensei is. And now even the person Naruto always keeps talking about is so strong. Why is everyone so impressive? Even Naruto was surprised. He thought, man, I thought that his title was cool, but I didn't know that he was one of the strongest ninjas in the world. Kakashi chuckled on seeing their reactions and asked, you guys know that Zabuza is one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, right? All 3 nodded. Kakashi continued, while there is no question about his strength, Zabuza could become a 7 ninja swordsman of the mist only when he was given the Kyubikirabacho blade. And the only reason why he could get that blade was because Fujin killed the previous wielder of Kyubikirabacho, who was as strong as Zabuza. The 3 genins were stunned once again. For a moment, Naruto didn't control his chakra properly and lost his footing. Luckily, he flipped in the air and landed on his feet. He looked at Kakashi and exclaimed, no way, big brother Fujin killed someone who was as strong as Zabuza. Meanwhile, Sasuke clenched his fists and thought, so Naruto has been getting the help of someone that strong. No wonder his strength has increased so rapidly. I need to get stronger faster as well. Kakashi noticed Sasuke's emotions and thought, good, this should motivate him to work harder. Kakashi looked at Naruto and said, he did. But that is a secret that very few in Konoha know, so never speak about it. The 3 genins nodded. Kakashi said, anyway, that's enough chit-chat. Sasuke and Sakura try climbing the tree. Naruto, come here. Sakura and Sasuke immediately began trying while Naruto walked over to Kakashi. Kakashi said, since you have already learnt this, I'll teach you another trick. It's a more advanced application of chakra control. Instead of climbing on trees, you'll walk on water. Naruto immediately replied, I know that exercise too, sensei. I can walk and run on water with ease. Kakashi wasn't very surprised. Since Fujin had taught him one exercise, it wasn't far-fetched for him to have taught the other one as well. The only reason why Kakashi was surprised at all was that Naruto's chakra control, despite knowing these two exercises, was lacking. Kakashi sighed internally while thinking, Fujin. He keeps making my job more difficult. What do I teach Naruto now? As he thought of Fujin, Kakashi couldn't help but think about his meeting with Fujin. A few weeks ago, Fujin had just gone through his morning workout and was about to return to his house when he suddenly stopped and said, Kakashi, what a pleasant surprise. A couple of trees away from Fujin, Kakashi was reading his book with his back resting against a tree. Hearing Fujin's voice, he closed his book while saying, Your senses are sharp as always. Fujin chuckled and said, It's not every day that someone visits the training ground while reading porn. Anyway, what's up? Unsurprisingly, there wasn't even a hint of embarrassment on Kakashi's face on being called out. He replied, Nothing much. I just noticed some interesting changes in my students recently. I was wondering whether you knew anything about it. Kakashi stared directly into Fujin's eyes as he asked the question. However, Fujin didn't show any signs and instead feigned ignorance perfectly and asked in a confused tone, What changes? Kakashi thought. Looks like he has mastered the art of poker face. I shouldn't be surprised considering how he fooled those bounty hunters. Kakashi answered, Well, they suddenly began trying to unmask me and steal my books. Since you are close to Naruto, did you notice anything strange or did he tell the reason behind them doing so? Kakashi gave his famous eye smile while talking with Fujin. Even so, his eyes were scrutinizing every muscle movement that Fujin made. Thankfully, having to deal with the likes of Hiruzen and Shikaku on a regular basis had made Fujin just enough shameless to not show anything. Instead, he just chuckled and said, they do that. That's cute. It looks like they really like their sensei. I suppose they wanted to impress you. Was that the only weird thing? Even though Fujin didn't give away anything, Kakashi cursed internally, it was him for sure. There is no doubt about it. All my instincts say that he is enjoying the situation. The one spying on us might be him as well, though I can't be too certain about it. However, he is undoubtedly the one behind their irregular behavior. Even though Fujin's act was good, he couldn't do anything about the instincts of an experienced ninja. That said, he didn't particularly care about it either. After all, even if Kakashi got irrefutable proof to blame Fujin, what could he do? Complain to Hiruzen. Knowing Fujin's tendencies, Hiruzen might not even raise this matter with Fujin. The only thing he could do was make the lives of his students hell. However, why would Fujin care about that? If Kakashi's sense of smell wasn't as good as it was, his clones would have grabbed some popcorn to enjoy their training sessions. Kakashi understood it as well. He just wanted to confirm a few things. Since he wouldn't get anything else from Fujin in this matter, he said, Yeah, that's probably it. I was definitely impressed. Anyway, Naruto speaks quite often about you. Fujin thought he'd better. Apart from Phantom Haven, I have spent the highest amount of my money and time on him. He smirked and said, That's good to hear. He speaks quite highly special taijutsu as well. Of you and your Kakashi immediately understood what Fujin implied. He smiled once again and said, I didn't know he thought so highly of my taijutsu. Anyway, I saw that you have taught him quite a few wind jutsus. Does he have an affinity to wind nature manipulation? Fujin shrugged again and said, No idea. I never checked his affinity. Kakashi looked at Fujin with a deadpan expression and asked, Why did you teach him wind jutsus then? Fujin replied, Those are just rank E jutsus. Anyone can learn them. Besides, Fujin replied, Those are just rank E jutsus. Anyone can learn them. Besides, these jutsus went perfectly with his prankful nature. I felt that it might be a good way to motivate him to train. Considering how well he has progressed, I wasn't wrong. Kakashi kept staring at Fujin while thinking, Why do I feel like he only did that to cause chaos through his pranks? He said, All right. Can you tell me what you taught him regarding wind release? I'll have to plan his training accordingly. Fujin nodded and informed Kakashi about the same. Kakashi had already figured out most of it. The only thing that surprised him was the fact that he had made Naruto complete the leaf-cutting exercise. Kakashi replied, I see, so he already has the basics down. That should make my work easier. Anyway, I'll see you around. I have to continue the training of my cute Fujin chuckled and said, Enjoy, students. Kakashi's figure disappeared from the training ground. A smirk appeared on Fujin's face as he thought, I didn't expect him to connect the dots so quickly. His instincts are quite good. Oh well, Naruto should get used to that training routine in a month or two. I'll manipulate him to create more trouble for Kakashi then. For now, he can continue teaching those five how to prank. Kakashi, who was moving towards his team, sighed and thought, such a troublesome fellow. Even though he didn't show any peculiarities, I got a feeling that he wanted to see me in trouble. Did the third put him up to this? Or is he still fond of causing trouble like he was when he asked the third for chakra metal swords? Even though it had been some time since Kakashi met Fujin, he still wasn't sure of the answer nor could he find Fujin's motives. Well, sensei, can you teach me some cool jutsus like Sasuke's fireball? Naruto grew impatient as Kakashi didn't say anything for a few seconds. Kakashi was about to answer when they heard, This is easier than I thought. The voice immediately attracted everyone's attention. Kakashi, Naruto, and Sasuke all saw Sakura sitting on the branch of a tree. Sasuke frowned as it meant that he was the only one who couldn't do so. Meanwhile, Naruto thought so quickly. I needed more than a week to do it properly. Even so, Naruto cheered for her while Kakashi praised her chakra control while teasing. It looks like there is just one of you who can't do this exercise then. Sasuke's frown intensified, but he didn't say anything and continued training. Kakashi asked Sakura to keep training as well and said, Naruto, follow me. Chapter 573, Great Breakthrough Jutsu. Kakashi and Naruto moved around 100 meters deeper into the woods before Kakashi stopped moving. Naruto asked curiously, What are we doing here, Kakashi-sensei? Kakashi said, I'll be teaching you a special jutsu. Naruto immediately became excited and exclaimed while jumping in joy, Really? Yahoo! Which special jutsu will you teach me, sensei? Kakashi sighed at Naruto's antics and said, Calm down, Naruto. Before I teach you, run your chakra through this piece of paper. Kakashi handed Naruto a chakra paper. Naruto was confused but followed his instructions. As soon as his chakra flowed through the paper split into two, surprising Naruto. Kakashi thought, it looks like Fujin's decision wasn't entirely random. Naruto asked in surprise, How did that happen? Kakashi explained, This is the chakra paper. It is used to find out your nature affinity. Naruto asked in a confused tone, Nature affinity? What's that? Kakashi slowly explained to Naruto the basics of nature manipulation and how chakra paper reacts to each affinity. It took a few tries and a huge portion of Kakashi's patience, but Naruto finally understood. He said, So my affinity is wind manipulation. That's why the paper split. Does that mean the paper will begin burning if Sasuke tries it? Kakashi answered. Not necessarily. Naruto became confused once again and asked, What do you mean? Doesn't he have an affinity for fire manipulation? Kakashi said, You don't need to have an affinity to be able to perform the jutsus of that particular nature. Even though you have an affinity for wind manipulation, you can learn jutsus of other natures as well. It's just that you'll have a harder time doing so. The chakra paper only shows your strongest affinity. For you, it is wind. For Sasuke, it might not be fire. Kakashi thought from his chakra, I have a feeling that Sasuke is the same type as me. Even though he didn't say so, I guess Fujin had the same feeling with Naruto, which is probably why he decided to teach Naruto wind jutsus. Naruto spoke with a confused expression. I don't understand, but whatever. Can you teach me the jutsu now, sensei? Kakashi nodded and said, Sure. The jutsu I'll be teaching you is called the Great Breakthrough Jutsu. It is a very strong wind release jutsu. Listen carefully. Since Fujin had already built up Naruto's basics, Kakashi decided to teach Naruto a jutsu that he could use more effectively in battle. While he could have decided against teaching Naruto and just let him protect Tazuna, like he would soon do with Sakura, He decided against it knowing that Naruto would annoy him constantly the entire time. He carefully explained everything to Naruto and even demonstrated it once despite the state of his body. Naruto immediately began practicing it. Kakashi looked at him and wondered, will he manage to learn this jutsu in a week's time? While Team 7 trained while awaiting their rematch with Zabuza, Fujin's group returned to the village in the evening. Fujin said, I and Elder Hamura will report the mission to Lord Hawkage. The rest of you can return to your homes. The group nodded and dispersed. Fujin and Hamura continued forward and entered Hiruzen's office. Hiruzen was pleasantly surprised to see them. He said, you two are back early. Did the negotiations go well? Fujin smiled and answered, it went as I had expected. I don't think they will be asking for help considering that their opponent is considerably weaker. On the off chance that they can't defeat them, then we can earn a fortune. As for allying with Iwa, I don't think they will do anything that foolish. Fujin's reply intrigued Hiruzen. He wondered, what exactly happened there? Maybe I should have disguised myself and gone with them as well. From Hamura's reaction, whatever happened there sure seems interesting. Hiruzen said, that sounds good. What exactly happened during the negotiations? Fujin nodded and gave a rundown. Initially, Hiruzen was pleased with how the interaction had gone. Fujin's insistence on not doing anything for free and not taking the initiative to allow them to owe him was something he had anticipated even before he assigned Fujin that mission. Apart from his reputation as the spectral swordsman, it was the main reason he chose Fujin to lead the negotiations. However, when Fujin informed him about the 4 choices he presented to Kusagakure, sweat appeared on his face. He was left speechless. He cursed, what the hell? Why does it feel like he was actually wanting a fight instead of negotiating? Even Sensei was never this overbearing. If he had an issue, he would just assassinate everyone he had an issue with, leaving no survivors or witnesses. Heck, even Danzo has never threatened an ally so openly. While threatening during negotiations wasn't anything new, and Hiruzen himself had employed that option several times, he had never threatened an ally directly. Hiruzen would generally utilize the danger that other major villages posed along with the long list of rank S ninjas from Konoha to disguise his threats as compassion and reminders. Hiruzen's eyes wandered towards his old friend, whose face was full of complaints. He immediately understood why Hamura was angry at him. In Hiruzen's defense, he hadn't anticipated Fujin escalating the issue to such an extent. Fortunately or unfortunately, Fujin's threat had achieved the results he desired. So Hiruzen couldn't even educate him and ask him to tone down his aggression slightly. He could only say, I am glad that the negotiations went well. Prepare the mission report and hand it to me. Fujin replied, I could, but considering that Elder Hamura traveled such a long distance to ensure that I didn't mess up at the negotiations and also observed everyone properly, I believe that it is only fair for Elder Hamura to have this honor. As Fujin was speaking, he turned his eyes from Hiruzen to Hamura. Hamura, who was still thinking about how to eat Hiruzen's head for sending someone so reckless to lead such a mission, was caught off guard. For a moment, he didn't know how to react on hearing the sudden praise. Before he could gather his thoughts, Fujin bowed slightly and said, Thank you for your guidance, Elder Hamura. I'll leave the mission report to you. See you later, Grandpa. Not waiting for anyone's response, Fujin disappeared from the room, leaving the 2 old men alone. With a few flickers, Fujin arrived at his house and muttered to himself, creating a mission report for a negotiation mission is a pain in the ass. It takes several days to complete even with the help of the diplomats. Though I can have my clones work on it, why should I waste them on such a pointless task when there is someone more experienced to take care of it? Back in the office, both Hiruzen and Hamura were left speechless. Given their experience, both could see the lack of sincerity in Fujin's gratitude. He had just dumped the work on Hamura and escaped. As someone who had gotten used to dumping his work on others, Hamura felt that he had returned half a century into the past. Hiruzen was the one to gather his thoughts first. He said with a smile on his face, "In that case, I'll be waiting for your report, old friend." Hamura immediately cursed, "Old friend my ass. Why didn't you tell me that this boy is such a lunatic? He is even worse than Danzo." Danzo would have ensured that Kusagakyure was surrounded by 1,000 root ninjas before even thinking about making such a threat. Instead, I nearly suffered a heart attack due to this boy. What would have happened if they didn't stay calm and attacked us instead? Do you think these old bones could have endured such an attack? Hiruzen knew that there was no point in debating with Hamura as there wasn't any way he'd win. He instead chuckled and said, "But everything worked out well, didn't it? I have to admit that even I underestimated how much he is feared though. When he was active in the Anbu, all the minor villages were terrified of him. I didn't imagine that that terror would still exist to such a degree." Hearing Hiruzen's words made Hamura think about the reactions of the Kusagakyure leaders. He said, "I didn't know that his reputation was so fearsome back when he was active either. You should have seen their reaction when Fujin mentioned their third choice. Even Hiroshi's eyes showed fear. It was as if he was certain that he would die if a battle broke out." Which missions was Fujin exactly a part of when he was in the Anbu, and how many of the rumors regarding him are true? Hiruzen replied, "Most of his missions were assassination and elimination missions. With how efficient he was, he gained a reputation very quickly. That said, there is no record of his mission reports. We burned it a long time ago. It'll create a lot of diplomatic issues if they ever come out. As for the rumors, there is not much point in paying attention to them. They are exaggerated as always." Chapter 574, The Compassionate Elders. As for the rumors, there is not much point in paying attention to them. They are exaggerated as always. Hamura was annoyed by Hiruzen's response. Even though it seemed like Hiruzen answered his queries, in truth, Hiruzen didn't give him any details. Understanding that Hiruzen didn't intend to leak details about Fujin's past and abilities, Hamura didn't push and instead said, "By the way, when we were returning, Fujin said something that was very intriguing. I didn't expect someone as young as him to have such thoughts." Hiruzen was surprised. Fujin hadn't mentioned anything that had happened after the meeting was over. He asked, "What did he say?" Hamura informed Hiruzen about Fujin's words to the diplomats when they questioned his methods. It caused Hiruzen to fall into a deep thought. Hamura asked, "What are you thinking?" Hiruzen sighed and said, "It looks like the next generation isn't fond of my conservative methods. Though I guess I shouldn't be surprised considering that they grew up on stories of how strong Konoha once was and the mighty warriors we produced, but only got to experience a weak Konoha." Hamura nodded and said, "In terms of approach he is more similar to a young Danzo than you." Hiruzen agreed and said, "That said, a bit of aggression isn't bad. Konoha has been passive ever since Minato's death. Though I and Danzo schemed quite a bit, all our work was done in the dark. With youngsters like Fujin and Kakashi stepping up, there is no harm in loosening up a bit and flexing our muscles. It might just be a good deterrent." Hamura shook his head and replied, "A bit of aggression will be good. However, being overbearing will have the opposite effect. Even though Konoha's strength has recovered to a great extent, we are no longer as strong as we were during the Second and the Third Great Ninja Wars, when we could take on all 4 great villages at the same time. Both Iwa and Kumo are as strong as us and have an advantage in terms of numbers. They only lack in terms of rank S ninjas. When the next great war takes place, we can't take on both of them at the same time. If Suna or Kiri were to help them, we would collapse for sure and might be forced to give up the majority of our lands or even the village. Fortunately, the current situation is favorable for us. Suna is very weak. All their old rank S ninjas have retired or died. Apart from the Kazekage, they don't have any rank S ninja. And Kiri is in ruins due to their civil war. Considering their weak strength, both will be wary of Iwa and Kumo's strength, worrying that they will be the next if we fall. We can use that fear to ally with these 2 countries. As long as we do that, We won't be at risk of confronting Iwa and Kumo by ourselves. However, if Fujin deals with the two of them just as aggressively, then there's no chance of making a lasting alliance. Hamura's expression became serious as he continued. Hiruzen, I can see that you are planning on grooming him to become a Hokage candidate. However, you should wait for him to become more mature. Otherwise, Konoha's future will be in danger. Becoming a Kage requires not only strength, but also wit and willingness to scheme in the shadows. Hamura's concerns weren't unfounded. Even though Konoha had an advantage in rank S ninjas in a large war, a single ninja had limited ability. Of course, that was unless someone like Hashirama or Madara, who could solo even the great villages, appeared. It was the reason why Minato was so feared and became the Hokage so easily despite the village having so many ambitious ninjas. Though not at the same level as those two monsters, killing 1,000 ninjas by himself had a great psychological impact on every single village. A few rounds, and Minato alone could destroy half of their armies. No village could afford such losses. Had Hamura known that Fujin had mastered the Flying Thunder God Jutsu or knew about the degree to which Fujin could control winds, Hamura might not have said what he did. Hiruzen replied, "You are forgetting that he is still only 16. We were very hot-headed and reckless back then as well. As for scheming in the darkness, Fujin isn't a slouch either. I guess he just felt that a direct approach was more convenient in this particular case." Hiruzen still remembered the stunt Fujin had pulled off in Suna. It was something that he never anticipated. As far as scheming in the dark went, it was one of the most brilliant ploys Hiruzen had seen. Even Danzo would have considered it as one of his best achievements had he been the one to do it. And Fujin had done so when he was just 13. So Hiruzen didn't doubt Fujin's scheming ability at all. He continued, "As for his wit, I am sure I don't need to say anything about it to you." A smile appeared on Hiruzen's face as Hamura understood what he was implying. He became slightly embarrassed on recalling that Fujin had dumped a rather time-consuming task on him and escaped before allowing him a response just a few minutes ago. He would be stuck with that work for more than a week. Hamura replied, "I am not saying that he is a bad choice, just that he'll need to show a lot more maturity for us to consider him over Kakashi." Hiruzen nodded and said, "That's true. However, we can worry about them later. Unless Jiraiya or Tsunade returns to accept the responsibility, I'll hang on until either of them is ready." Hamura nodded. That was all he wanted to hear. The two discussed some more stuff before Hamura left. The next day, Fujin completed his morning routine and freshened up while thinking, "My clones didn't find Naruto or the others inside the village. I guess they finally went to the land of Wave. I wonder if there will be any changes." Fujin didn't particularly care about Zabuza or the sword. Neither was very useful for him. The only one he thought of was Haku. He sighed and thought, a shame that he is very loyal to Zabuza. Otherwise, he would have been a great subordinate to look after Phantom Haven. Oh well, nothing I could do. Zabuza probably recruited him even before I graduated. The same as Kimimaro, another great option if not for his disease. Anyway, the next council meeting will be in 3 days. It's time to make my move. Since Fujin had decided to increase his influence in the village and make his position in the council unmovable, he had made up his mind to do something very impactful. He created a shadow clone and sent him to the office. Just when the clone left the house, an Anbu captain, wearing the monkey mask, approached him and called out, "Fujin, I have something to discuss." The clone stopped and looked at him. Ever since Fujin took over the training of the 5 kids with Kekkei Genkai, the Anbu captain had become free. As a result, he was put in charge of handling the things inside Fujin's compound, other than his house. The clone asked, "What's the issue?" Monkey answered, "We are facing some shortage in training equipment. In addition, I feel that a particular facility should be added to our training building. It will help the trainees a lot. There is also some damaged equipment that needs to be replaced." Monkey listed a few more things that were needed. One thing Fujin had learnt over the last couple of months was that managing a compound with over 100 people was no joke. If trained Anbu ninjas weren't assisting him, that would have been a full-time job. Even with Hiruzen's arrangements, there was still a lot he needed to do. It had increased his respect for the clan leaders. Thankfully, he had a way out. After listening to Monkey, Fujin's clone replied, these will assist the kids a lot. I agree we should make these changes. Visit Elder Koharu and inform her about the situation. Ask her to get these done as soon as she can. It'll be best if everything is done within 3 days. Despite wearing a mask, Fujin's clone could observe that Monkey was feeling awkward. He said, "With all due respect, I don't think we should trouble the elders for such small issues." The last time I went to Elder Koharu, she was looking extremely annoyed. In the last couple of months, Monkey had visited Koharu 5 times. The first couple of times, she didn't mind. The next couple of times, he could sense that she was annoyed. The last time, she directly scolded him for coming to her with such small issues. Fujin's clone became extremely serious and replied, "Don't view our respected elders through the same lens as other officials. Unlike them, who only have those jobs because they are afraid of risking their lives, Elder Koharu and Elder Hamura do it because of their compassion and love for the younger generation. Nothing makes them happier than seeing the young kids grow. Even though they might act like they are annoyed, in truth, they are happy that they get to guide the youngsters. It's just that they don't show it on their face. However, having worked closely with them on the council, I can guarantee this. So you don't need to be concerned. Just ask her. If she acts unwilling, just tell her that I requested it so that the kids can train in the best possible environment." Despite Fujin's seriousness, Monkey was very skeptical. He thought, "I'm afraid he has the wrong impression of the elders." It didn't look like she was acting at all, but, despite what he thought, there was nothing he could do. He could only follow Fujin's instructions and went to see Koharu. Chapter 575, Best Pals. Seeing the Anbu captain leave, Fujin's clone smirked and thought, "Hamura will be busy with the mission report for some time. I guess I'll just continue annoying Koharu. Thanks to the image she created, she can't even say no without taking a significant hit to her reputation." He flickered a few times and reached his office. Yasushi and Haruma were slightly surprised to see Fujin arrive so early. Fujin's clone took his seat and said, "Bring all the files that appeared in the last couple of weeks. Also, send a messenger to call Katsuhiro. Ask him to see me immediately and bring the proposal with him." Yasushi was surprised but nodded and got to work immediately. While he did so, Monkey reached Koharu and informed her about what he needed. He even mentioned that all that needed to be done in 3 days. With an annoyed expression, Koharu scolded, "Boy, how many times do I have to tell you to not bother me for such small matters? I already told you to approach the other officials. You think I'm free to attend every small matter?" Monkey got a bit nervous. However, he recalled Fujin's words and thought she acted just like he anticipated. Now, is this just an act or is she really annoyed? "Sigh, I don't get paid enough for such a risky job." He bowed slightly and replied, "I apologize, Elder Koharu. However, Suzuki Fujin instructed me to make this request to you. He said that only if you take care of this will the kids get the best possible environment to train and become stronger." Hearing his name, Koharu was annoyed even more. She cursed, "That brat, he is purposefully annoying me. From what I know, he didn't approach Hamura even once. It must be because I was the one to speak against him. Unfortunately, declining his requests isn't easy. If the issue blows up, I could lose my hard-earned reputation over a small matter, just like Danzo." Both Koharu and Hamura were informed by Danzo about the injustice he had suffered. Both were shocked by how such a small matter had blown up. It had made the two of them look at Fujin in a different light. It was also one of the factors why Hamura tried to dig up on his past and didn't argue when Hiruzen said that Fujin could scheme in the dark as well. In the end, Koharu said in an unpleasant tone, "I'll look into it. However, ask him to not bother me again for such small tasks." Monkey was surprised. He exclaimed internally she accepted. I was sure that she would decline. Could Fujin be right? Could it be that this was really an act? He immediately gathered his thoughts and said, "Thank you, Elder." He was still confused but decided to get the job done first. Katsuhiro entered the Hokage building and walked towards Fujin's office. En route, several eyes noticed him. He ignored them and reached Fujin's office. Even before he could knock, he heard, "Come in." He entered the office and saw Fujin's clone going through several files. To his surprise, the clone closed the files and set them aside. Generally, the clone would make him wait until he was done reading the files he was going through. It was the first time Fujin's clone had given him any priority. Fujin's clone looked at Katsuhiro and asked, "Have you made the corrections to the proposal?" Katsuhiro answered, "I made the changes you suggested and made some changes of my own." He handed Fujin's clone the file. Without saying anything, the clone began going. He handed Fujin's clone the file. Without saying anything, the clone began going through the proposal. Several times, disappointment appeared on the clone's face. It was visible to everyone in the room, including Katsuhiro. Katsuhiro gritted his teeth in rage while trying to control his anger. He cursed internally, "This demonic brat. How much will he humiliate me? This is the 8th time I have visited him and the 6th time I made changes to the proposal. Don't tell me he will tell me to make changes again. The council meeting is in a few days. If we miss it, then I won't be able to put forth this proposal for several months again. Why doesn't he just admit that he doesn't want to pass this proposal and let me take this credit?" The past couple of months had been extremely irritating and humiliating for Katsuhiro. It was so bad that he began suffering from high blood pressure. Initially, Fujin had planned on using bureaucracy to keep pushing the proposal for a couple of years, by using the tactic of denying Katsuhiro opportunities to meet with him, and making him redo the proposal whenever he couldn't avoid a meeting. However, after he had a change of heart and decided to increase his political weight while Hiruzen was still in charge, he decided to make Katsuhiro go through the years-long process in a couple of months. As a result, the old elite jounin was in mental agony. He often regretted listening to Danzo and picking up a fight with Fujin. Fujin's clone sighed and muttered, "I'm disappointed in you, Katsuhiro-san. This is your 7th attempt. Why is the proposal still so full of mistakes?" The way he spoke, everyone could easily feel the vast disappointment in his voice. Katsuhiro gritted his teeth hard and did his best to not lose his composure. He didn't want to show to everyone that Fujin had gotten under his skin. At the same time, Yasushi and Haruma were also doing their best. They had an even harder time controlling their laughter. Luckily for Katsuhiro, they somehow managed to do so. Katsuhiro asked as calmly as he could, "What are the mistakes? I'll fix them again." Fujin's clone shook his head and replied, "The council meeting is in a few days. If I let you continue making the proposal, who knows when it'll be good enough to be put forth. I'll take care of it. You can leave." Katsuhiro was surprised by his sudden statement. He expected Fujin to continue using his delaying tactics. He never imagined that Fujin's clone would do the opposite. He should have been pleased by this development. Unfortunately, the joy was all sucked out since Fujin's clone hadn't given up the opportunity to insult him once again. Katsuhiro controlled his anger while thinking, "I was afraid that he'd keep pushing the proposal ahead. Looks like I was wrong. If he puts forth the proposal in the next council meeting, I can have a chance to lay a claim to his seat. I'll endure for now. He'll quickly realize what a grave mistake he has made." He said, "All right, I'll leave it to you then." Fujin's clone nodded without even looking at him. He didn't need to think much to know what Katsuhiro was thinking. However, Fujin didn't really see him as a threat. Any annoyance would come from the other council members. At best, Katsuhiro would be used as a tool like how Danzo tried. Even if Fujin eliminated him, they could just use someone else instead. So he wasn't interested in spending any more time on Katsuhiro. Giving him sleepless nights and high blood pressure was enough punishment for aiming at Fujin's seat. As Katsuhiro exited Fujin's office, he heard some soft voices. "Look, it's Katsuhiro-sama. He visited Counselor Suzuki Fujin's office again. Yeah, he has been visiting here a lot. In the last 2 months, this is his 6th visit. I wonder why he visits him so often. I wonder about it as well. It's almost like they are best pals. No way, he is like 30 years older than the counselor, haha." A few similar comments were passed by others. Fujin had become famous inside the building for showing up so rarely. Hence, whenever he appeared to work, it would gain everyone's attention. Some out of genuine interest, others out of jealousy. After all, who wouldn't like to work just once every 1 or 2 weeks? And every time Fujin visited his office, Katsuhiro would show up. Quite a few eyes had noticed it and had become interested. Several speculations flew as to why Katsuhiro visited him every single time. Katsuhiro gritted his teeth and continued moving while ignoring the small talk of others. He cursed, "Best pals. I'd fucking kill him if I could do it and get away with it." Thankfully, no one knows what exactly happened inside the office. I'll just need to ensure that his 2 assistants stay quiet. Back in the office, Fujin's clone finished reading the proposal Katsuhiro had sent. He chuckled while thinking, "Not a bad proposal, it is pretty much perfect. I just need to make slight changes to it so that I can include the clans as well. This way, even if they aren't happy with this, they still won't be offended as their ninjas will benefit as well. While they won't benefit as much as civilian ninjas, the clans can't complain as everyone gets the same benefits." Chapter 576, A Shortcut. Sitting in his basement, Fujin was looking at the proposal in front of him. He had figured out what changes he should be making to the proposal. However, he faced an issue when he started incorporating the changes into the proposal. Fujin let out a sigh and muttered to himself, "I now see why Tsunade hated paperwork so much. The changes I plan to make aren't a lot, but putting it on paper will take more than a day to complete. No wonder Katsuhiro was that angry. I thought it was just due to the passive humiliating comments I kept passing. But now, I guess that a good part of that anger was due to working on this proposal 7 times. I don't even want to imagine how torturous that would be for someone who never worked in the Hawkage building before." Fujin shook his head and got up. He created a few shadow clones and left the work to them. While he would still need to endure the headaches, at least he wouldn't be wasting his time. The new shadow clones began working on the proposal, while the remaining shadow clones kept working on the seal. While they worked, Fujin left his house and looked towards the building to his right. Winds suddenly picked up pace and began moving towards the building at a high speed. Takeshi was relaxing in his room, going through one of the books he had taken from the library. Suddenly, he felt something and got on his feet with his alertness raised to the max as he muttered, "This chakra and the breeze." In Takeshi's closed room, Wind suddenly took the form of a person. He watched with a surprised look as the winds transformed into a clone of Fujin and wondered, "Holy hell, how can winds do something like this? Why is Sensei's wind release cooler than my scorch release?" he asked. "Sensei, is that you?" Fujin's wind clone looked at Takeshi and said, "Meet me in the training ground immediately." The clone quickly dispersed into the wind. In a few seconds, the air in his room calmed down. Takeshi muttered, "That was cool and freaky at the same time." He quickly left his room and ran to the training ground opposite the compounds, where he saw Fujin sitting on a stump. He stopped right in front of Fujin and asked, "Sensei, are we beginning our training?" Fujin replied, "Sort of. I'm a bit busy with council duties. We will begin the regular training in a few days after the council meeting is over. I called you here because I mastered an interesting jutsu recently. I wanted to see if I could use it to teach you more efficiently. If it works, then it might be very helpful for you and a bit helpful to your teammates." Takeshi became confused. He asked, "Why will it be only a bit helpful to the others and very helpful to me?" Fujin answered, "It's because Scorch Release is a fusion of Fire and Wind Release, which are my strongest affinities as well. I don't have much expertise in Water and Lightning Release, so they will have limited help. Anyways, you'll understand once we try." Takeshi nodded. Fujin said. Sit down and calm your mind. For what I am planning, you need to be as calm as you can be, otherwise it'll be difficult to implement. Takeshi became even more curious. He sat down on the ground and began meditating. Fujin thought, luckily, he is the most calm one from his group. Now let's see if this will work. Even though this jutsu has a lot of other uses and benefits, it was this ability that pushed me to ask for it from Hiruzen. I'll later try it with Ranmaru as well, though I'll have to do something about the seals I placed on him. While he was thinking, several shadow clones appeared next to Fujin. A couple stayed next to Fujin while the rest flickered in different directions and hid themselves. They would ensure that no one disturbs Fujin. The seals Fujin had placed in the training ground were activated as well. Even Hiruzen wouldn't be able to spy on the training ground until he deactivated the seals. After a few minutes, Takeshi opened his eyes and said, I am calm, sensei. Fujin nodded and said, Good. Now don't resist. Fujin weaved a few hand signs. Takeshi's eyes widened as he noticed something leave Fujin's body. He wondered, is that sensei's soul? Did Sensei master Kato Dan's speciality? Isn't that a forbidden jutsu? Fujin's soul looked at him and said, Calm yourself, Takeshi. And yes, this is spirit transformation jutsu, the jutsu Kato Dan created. Now, don't resist. After saying so, Fujin's soul entered Takeshi's body. Takeshi felt slight unease and became uncomfortable but didn't feel anything else. Suddenly, he heard a voice directly inside his head. With the spirit transformation jutsu, I can freely enter the bodies of other ninjas. I can take control of their bodies and even suppress or destroy their souls. In this training, I'll be utilizing the first aspect. By taking control of your body, I'll use a jutsu that I have mastered but you haven't. You will pay full attention to your body and the way your chakra gets manipulated and have your body memorize it so that you can do so instinctively. If it works like how I envisioned it, then you'll be able to master those techniques to a great extent within a few minutes. If not, then that'll be unfortunate. Your training will continue as usual. Did you understand? No need to speak. Just think of the answer and I'll know. To say Takeshi was shocked was an understatement. He could only think, yes, sensei. I understand. I never imagined that the spirit transformation jutsu could be used in such a manner. Fujin's soul chuckled and said, There are several ways to use every jutsu. It just depends on how creative you can get and how good your control over the jutsu is. Always remember this when you train in the future, especially for your Scorch release. Scorch release is as flexible as wind release while being more destructive than fire release. How you can use it will only be limited by your imagination. You already know how Pakura from Sunagakyur could use it. However, don't restrict yourself to her fighting style or my fighting style. Create your own style. If you succeed in doing so, then you will most likely become a rank S ninja in the future. Otherwise, an elite jounin will be the max you could reach even with my guidance. Takeshi noted down Fujin's words in his heart. He would never forget such advice and thought, I understand, sensei. I will create my own fighting style with Scorch release. Fujin's soul said, Good. First, display me your current jutsus so that I can get a hang of how you mold chakra inside your body. Then I could replicate it while using my jutsus. Takeshi replied, All right, sensei. He got up. While the two of them conversed, Fujin's clones had moved his main body away. Without a soul, Fujin's main body couldn't move. It needed to be protected by his clones. It was why he had increased the security in the training ground. If someone actually attacked the training ground, the clones could buy enough time for his soul to return to his main body. Even if that couldn't be done, the clones could just teleport with the main body into his house. Fujin wasn't worried about anyone breaking into his house. Takeshi asked, Which jutsu should I use, sensei? Takeshi asked, Which jutsu should I use, sensei? Fujin replied, Use Great Breakthrough, Great Fireball, and Extremely Steaming Murder jutsus. Takeshi nodded and began weaving his hand signs. Wind Release, Great Breakthrough Jutsu Fire Release, Great Fireball Jutsu Scorch Release, extremely steaming murder jutsu one by one. Takeshi displayed all the three jutsus. Fujin didn't care about the first two jutsu. It was the third one where all his attention was focused on. With his soul inside Takeshi's body, Fujin could feel how Takeshi's chakra was being molded as if it was his own. Fujin thought, so that's how fire and wind chakra fuse to form Scorch Kekkei Genkai. As I calculated, the fusion has to happen inside my body. Otherwise, it can't be considered a Kekkei Genkai and will only be a combination jutsu. Still, even though I can feel it clearly, replicating this will still be difficult. The only good thing is that I now have a reference point. I might succeed in copying Scorch Kekkei Genkai with some practice. Chapter 577, Rasa's Troubles. Everything Fujin had said until that point, though true, was completely bullshit. The real reason why Fujin used this technique was to get a better hang of Takeshi's Scorch release. Apart from being able to study his soul, this was the main reason why Fujin wanted this jutsu and willingly traded top-quality human puppets with Hiruzen to get it. Of course, Fujin wasn't completely sure of its effectiveness. After all, if learning Kekkei Genkai was that easy, then Dan would have unlocked several Kekkei Genkai and would have likely been far stronger than the Sanins. However, that wasn't the case. On the contrary, he hadn't mastered any Kekkei Genkai, nor had Orochimaru, who could use a more advanced jutsu. What should I do now? Since Fujin didn't reply, Takeshi became doubtful. Fujin's soul answered, "It looks like I underestimated the difficulty of influencing your chakra and molding it properly. I will need to observe your chakra network for far longer. Continue using extremely steaming murder jutsu." "All right," Takeshi replied and continued creating more flaming orbs. Fujin just carefully observed. While he had seen the process and got some clues by observing the first time, he was still quite far away from understanding how to fuse it properly. As he had expected, even though experiencing it in this manner was extremely helpful, he couldn't learn it in an instant. Fujin thought, oh well. Even though it isn't instantaneous, I have a feeling that I'll master Scorch Kekkei Genkai sooner or later. After all, I can always refer to him if I ever face any issues or have doubts. After using the jutsu 5 times, Takeshi's breathing became heavy. He said, "My chakra is running low. I can't use this jutsu again." Fujin's soul replied, "Don't worry, continue doing it." Fujin's soul placed his palm on Takeshi's soul and transferred some of his chakra to him. In the blink of an eye, Takeshi's chakra reserves became full once again. Takeshi's eyes widened. He asked, "Spirit transformation jutsu can do this as well?" Fujin's soul chuckled and said, "Yup. Don't tell others though. Depending too much on others at this age isn't a good thing." Takeshi nodded. Fujin thought, well, it's not like I'd ever transfer chakra even if someone asks. A shame that this jutsu doesn't allow me to absorb chakra. If I could, I'd have definitely made some chakra batteries. I could even issue missions for that purpose. Perhaps the lazy ninjas would have accepted for making some easy money. Takeshi ran out of chakra once again and was again refilled by Fujin. Fujin's soul thought, that said, I'm not at my full chakra level either. 70% of my chakra is with my clones. Fortunately, his chakra reserves are much lower than mine. I can refill it a few times. Then, I'll give him the reward. I'll only give him one jutsu at a time. That way, I will have reasons to keep doing this. Fujin refilled his chakra reserves 4 times when he felt that he wouldn't learn anything more from just observing him. He immediately had another idea. He said, "All right, I've got a hang of it now. Relax, I'll take over your body. Don't resist." Takeshi replied, "All right." He mentally prepared himself. A second later, Fujin took full control of Takeshi's body and said, "Feel how the chakra moves in your body. This will be an important jutsu for you." He began weaving hand signs and softly said, "Fire release, fire dragon flame bullet jutsu." He took a deep breath and shot a fire dragon from his mouth. The dragon, instead of moving forward, began revolving around Takeshi. Fujin's soul instructed, "While Fire Dragon Flame Bullet is generally an attacking jutsu for you, it'll be an amazing defensive jutsu. Takeishi thought for a bit and asked, how Fujin's soul answered. It's simple. After learning the Fire Dragon Jutsu, you have to create a Scorched Dragon Jutsu by using Fire Dragon as a base, and you need to have amazing control over it. Once you succeed in creating it, improve your control over it and manipulate it in such a way that it can coil around you. When you succeed, very few ninjas will be able to fight you at close range. Most would be long dead before they make it through the dragon. Takeshi's eyes sparkled as he imagined how strong the defense would be. While it won't protect him against long and medium-range jutsus, it would be extremely effective against the ones who didn't have such options. As for the ones that stay at a distance, he could just run into them. Fujin's soul exited his body and said, now that I have shown you how to do it, try to replicate the process and master the Fire Dragon Flame Bullet Jutsu. You can approach me if you face any issues. I have refilled your chakra reserves again. So you can practice it right away. When you master it and begin attempting to create the Scorched Dragon Jutsu, find me. I'll guide you to ensure that you don't make any mistakes or do something hazardous for yourself or others. Takeishi immediately replied, I will, thank you, sensei. Takeishi was indeed very grateful. He never imagined that someone would go to such lengths to help him become stronger. Needless to say, Fujin's kind act had created quite an impression on his young mind. Fujin's soul nodded and said, I'll be waiting. He immediately disappeared and flew into his own body. Takeishi turned his gaze towards him. Fujin smiled before he and his clones disappeared. The seals in the training ground that blocked Hiruzen's crystal ball were deactivated as well. Takeishi continued practicing while Fujin returned to his house. En route, he tried to replicate how the fusion happened inside Takeishi's body. He tried a few times but ultimately didn't succeed. Fujin analyzed, it looks like it won't be that easy. That said, it was very helpful. I can feel that I have progressed quite a bit within a few minutes. If I were to try it by myself, I'd have needed several months or even years to reach this step. I'll experiment with it again later. The next time, I will try to use Scorch Release while I am in control of his body. Experiencing how to do it through him will be much better than just observing. Regardless, if I learn it, what should I do? Should I use it with Fujin identity? Though Scorch Release won't make me much stronger normally, it might give a huge boost to my Wind domain. On the other hand, it might help me raise Shiden Identity's combat power to rank S. He thought for a bit before deciding, oh well, no need to think too much. I'll just use it with the identity that is forced to use it first. After all, Shiden is supposed to stay hidden and not fight. While Fujin was working on growing both his strength and influence, a particular individual was very annoyed due to Fujin's actions despite being over 1,000 kilometers away from him. In truth, he wasn't aware that Fujin was the one behind the incident that troubled him. In Sunagakure, Baki was in Rasa's office. Only the two of them were present in the office. Rasa asked, is there any update? Baki shook his head and answered, no. We have exhausted all means of trying to find them or create contact with them. Unfortunately, nothing has succeeded. Our spies in Tanagakure got hands on a lot of their secret information as well. However, there is no mention of them. It's as if they have vanished entirely. Baki paused for a few seconds before continuing. It has been nearly 3 months since Yamakawa town was attacked. Since that day, we have completely lost contact with the ninjas stationed there. We can only assume that they were killed along with the Yamakawa family. The killers probably took their bodies with them. A frown appeared on Rasa's face. He cursed. Those ninjas included an elite jounin and a Fuinjutsu grandmaster. Unless we recover their bodies, we can't assume their deaths. It's too costly for the village to face such losses just before our plan is put into action. Not to mention, reports claimed that the town was attacked by puppets. It has worsened our relationship with Tanagakure. Since I didn't send anyone, it can only mean that it was someone else. I had my spies collect information in the other hidden village to see if someone suddenly began training a large number of puppeteers. However, no village has done so. It could only mean that it was Sasori. Rasa's words were full of hatred. Yamakawa was the perfect town to station his ninjas in. However, that town was completely ruined due to Sasori's actions. Not only were his losses grave, but the town had also become a hub for Konoha ninjas, increasing the difficulty in moving secretly for Suna. Chapter 578, 6 Ninjas to Watch Out For. Baki pointed out, but Lord Kazekage, there are still some inconsistencies due to which I'm not sure if it was Sasori. The reports say that nearly 100 puppets were involved in the attack. A single puppeteer can't control so many puppets. It was why we suspected involvement of other villages. Rasa replied, it doesn't have to be him alone. It has been 13 years since he went rogue. He could have accepted some students and taught them our secret technique. I have confirmed with Orochimaru that Sasori is in Akatsuki. He has also trained a lot of spies, so it isn't far-fetched for him to have trained some underlings. Baki's mood became heavy on hearing Rasa's speculations. He asked, what do we do now, Lord? Rasa thought for a long time to decide what his next step should be. Baki waited patiently while thinking as well. Finally, Rasa said, Sasori has to be eliminated. He is too big of a danger to be left alive. However, now is not the time. We can't divide our forces to find and fight him. For now, we will focus on crushing Konoha. That is more important for our village. Since Yamakawa town has been destroyed, and Tanigakure is hostile towards us, we can't use their towns to hide our forces. If we do so, Konoha might become suspicious as well and make better preparations. We will only move small squads to the land of rivers a few days before the war begins. They will sneak into the land of fire and stealthily travel to Konoha a few days before I reach Konoha. When the signal is given, they will use reverse summoning to summon our elites for a quick and deadly attack on Konoha. Baki thought for a bit and nodded. That was the only option they had left. Rasa looked at him and said, you should begin preparing as well. As planned, you will be leading Gaara's squad for the Chunin exams. Your squad will be our vanguard and also our secret weapon. Only with Shukaku can we buy enough time and avoid being swamped by Konoha ninjas. It's time to inform and prepare the kids. Call them here. Baki nodded and left. A few minutes later, he returned with Rasa's children. Temari and Kankuro became a bit nervous upon seeing Rasa's serious expression. As for Gaara, he didn't care. Rasa said, listen to what I say very carefully. Rasa informed his children that Suna would soon be attacking Konoha. He informed them about the plans that they needed to know. Temari and Kankuro were shocked when they heard Rasa order Gaara to let Shukaku lose when the signal was given. They wanted to protest, but one look from Rasa made them eat their words. Rasa said, that's all you need to know. I will emphasize this once again. Nothing that we discussed in this room should get out. Remember your roles properly. The future of the village will depend on whether you can do your job properly. If you fail, we will be surrounded by thousands of Konoha ninjas without any reinforcements to help us. Temari and Kankuro were terrified upon imagining that scene. Both gulped nervously. On the other hand, Gaara was excited to kill more people and let Mother drink more blood. He didn't care how many enemies he'd be facing. Rasa handed his kids a book and said, this book has a list of Konoha's elite jounins. Memorize all of them, especially the first 6 ones. Every single one of them is extremely dangerous and will pose a great threat to our plan. If you meet them in Konoha, act naturally. Once the war begins, be careful of them. They might be able to even stop Shukaku's rampage. This time, even Gaara was shocked. In Suna, there was just one person who could stop Shukaku. It was their father, the Kazekage. However, Konoha had as many as 6. Temari opened the book while her brothers peeked into the book. The person on the first page was none other than Hiruzen, the 3rd Hokage. While they read his details, Baki said, at his peak, the 3rd Hokage was nearly unstoppable. It had caused others to call him the god of shinobi. Fortunately, he is much older now and has grown weaker. The trio read his information before turning the page. The one on the 2nd page was Shimura Danzo. Baki gave a short introduction of him as well and mentioned his injuries and the fact that he needed a walking stick to walk around. He did the same for Jiraiya and Tsunade, who were on the third and fourth pages respectively, while mentioning that neither of those two stayed in the village. Temari and Kankuro wondered, what the hell is up with this village? Their cage is an old man who should have long retired. There is another old man who is handicapped but still is said to have a lot of power in the village. But the two Sanins, who are at their prime, don't stay in the village. The two couldn't make any sense of the information and even doubted whether it was true. However, considering that it was their father who had given them the information, the two didn't have any choice but to believe it. On the fifth page was the image of a silver-haired ninja who covered his left eye with his headband. While they read his information, Baki said, "He is Hate Kakashi, also known as the Copy Ninja. With his Sharingan, he has copied over 1,000 jutsus, which earned him his title. He was also the student of the fourth Hokage, the Yellow Flash. With his Sharingan, there is a chance that he could influence Shukaku, which makes him very dangerous for our plan. During the assault, I and others will ensure that he stays away from Gaara." The three kids nodded before turning the page once again. Their eyes landed on a picture. The person in the picture didn't look unique like the five that preceded him. On first look, he looked like any other young man. However, there was one distinct feature that caught the eye of the trio. It was his eyes. They were as dark as the very abyss itself. Their eyes moved from his eyes to his face. At first glance, his face, though handsome, was unremarkable. It was a face that would easily blend into the crowd. However, on closer inspection, they noticed subtle symmetries. His jawline was very well defined, and his complexion was fair but held a hint of tan, which was a result of spending long hours training outside. His hair was spiky black and seemed to be waving in the winds while his expression was that of indifference. Everything combined together very well to give him quite a unique charm. As for his body, it was a testament to discipline and training. His arms showed how toned his body was, showcasing the countless hours spent training. They weren't bulky by any means, but the muscles were clearly visible to the Kazekage children. He wore Konoha's headband on his forehead and was wearing the standard Jounin vest. The shirt underneath, as well as his pants, were black in color. On his forearms were bracers, and his hands were covered in fingerless gloves with metal plates covering the back of his hands. After seeing his appearance properly, the three of them began reading his details. Baki spoke once again. "He is Suzuki Fujin. He is just a bit older than you guys and gained fame a year ago when the third Tsuchikage announced that he was the spectral swordsman. Even though he is very young, he is still extremely strong. He specializes in wind jutsus and can even use the wind vacuum technique that Lord Second created. He is well known for his blinding speed and assassination skills. In addition, he is also a Fuinjutsu Grandmaster, which could give him some means to deal with Shukaku." The trio was surprised. Kankuro said, "Seriously, he's just a couple of years older than me." Rasa ignored his elder son and looked at Gaara while saying, "We also suspect that he was the one to injure you and kill Suzumu. If he attacks you for some reason, always ensure that your sand is defending you." Gaara's eyes widened. The memory of him bleeding resurfaced in his brain. At the same time, Temari exclaimed, "Wait a minute, Uncle Suzumu died 2.5 years ago. Do you mean to say that he killed Uncle Suzumu and injured Gaara when he was just 13 years old?" Chapter 579, Delusion. Shock could be heard in Temari's voice. Kankuro was shocked as well. A minute ago he was wondering whether he'd be as strong as Fujin when he turned 16. However, he soon discovered that he was far inferior to a younger Fujin. Temari had similar thoughts as well, considering that Fujin was just a year older than her. To their surprise, Rasa didn't say anything and just nodded. Baki said, "Well, we only suspect it is him. We aren't entirely sure as he never used any vacuum jutsus during the fights. However, if what the Tsuchikage said is true, then it was most likely him." Baki's words weren't reassuring. While they had relaxed after learning that two of Konoha's strongest ninjas weren't in the village and two more were old and past their prime, hearing about Kakashi and Fujin made Temari and Kankuro nervous. Rasa could see it and said, "You don't need to worry about these ninjas. I'll be making arrangements to deal with them. I'm just informing you so that you three don't engage with them." There are still other names in the book. Though they aren't as strong as these six, they have the elite Jounin rank as well. Go through them as well. Temari and Kankuro nodded. The three of them looked through the remaining names. There were over a dozen ninjas, which included the likes of Guy, Asuma, Renjiro, Katsuhiro, the clan leaders, and others. Once they were done reading, Rasa said, "The success of this plan is critical for the prosperity of Suna. Keep that in mind and train seriously for the next few months. All three of you should qualify for the last round of the Chunin exam." Temari and Kankuro nodded while Gaara went back to being indifferent. The three of them left Rasa's office. Once the door closed, Kankuro said, "Man, Konoha is scary. Their 13-year-olds can attack Gaara and kill Uncle Suzumu." Temari corrected him. "It was just one ninja. Others should be ordinary. Otherwise, Konoha would have conquered the entire world by now." Kankuro replied, "Yes, you are right. But still, that's scary. Gaara, how did he injure?" "Shut up." Gaara, whose memories of that day had resurfaced, unleashed his bloodlust, scaring both Temari and Kankuro. With a crazy expression on his face, Gaara exclaimed, "Next time I'll kill him." The bloodlust Gaara was oozing quietened his siblings. Not wanting to provoke him, they silently went away from him. Back in the office, Baki asked with uncertainty, "Do we really have plans to deal with all of them? Even though the Hokage is old, he should still be extremely strong. If one of the Sanins appeared, then we would lose our advantage. If both appeared, we would be at a disadvantage. Stopping Kakashi and Fujin will be a challenge as well. I can stop one of them, but the other will likely cut through our ninjas and stop Shukaku." Rasa replied, "I'm aware. Don't worry. Though he didn't tell me why, Orochimaru is certain that Tsunade won't return. He is also certain that Danzo won't participate in the defense unless we attack his root headquarters. Jiraiya will most likely return, but we can handle him and Hiruzen, as I'll have Orochimaru assisting me. For Fujin, Orochimaru said that he has a capable subordinate from the Kaguya clan. He'll be responsible for stopping the boy. I'll be inspecting that Kaguya clan ninja before we start our plan. Orochimaru said that he'll be having one of his subordinates face Kakashi as well. Only if he fails, you'll have to ensure that Kakashi doesn't use his Sharingan on Shukaku. Even though we will be outnumbered, we'll gain the upper hand by taking advantage We'll gain the upper hand by taking advantage of Shukaku's rampage. In addition, we will force them to disperse their forces by attacking with Orochimaru's snake summons from all directions." Baki calmed slightly after hearing Rasa's preparations. Unfortunately, neither of the two was aware of the fact that they hadn't considered a ninja who was on par with both Fujin and Kakashi. Not to mention, they were completely in the dark regarding Orochimaru's real intentions, or the fact that Konoha had got wind of their intentions. A couple of days later in Konoha, the leaders had assembled in the council room. Most leaders were slightly confused. Under normal circumstances, the council meeting should have been conducted around 3 months later because it had been just 3 months since their previous meeting. While council meetings could be called impromptu in emergency situations, like when the root headquarters was blown up, or when Fujin was inducted into the council, nothing of that sort had happened in recent times. Even though the village was tense post the explosion, nothing happened after Danzo's political power was stripped away. The village was very peaceful. As such, everyone was curious. Only Fujin had an idea, while Shikaku was aware of the real reason why this meeting was being conducted. Hiruzen was the last one to enter the room. He took his seat and said, "Let's begin the meeting." Since Hiruzen didn't say anything, the meeting began normally. Everyone informed Hiruzen about their status. Reports about border patrol were shared. Any incidents that stood out were reported. The trading and agriculture statistics, as well as the number of bandit attacks, were discussed. When the discussion on the routine things was finished, Aburame Shibai asked, "Is there any follow-up on the attack that took place inside our village a few months ago?" Since the civilian council members were present as well, Shibai didn't take Root's name. The civilian council members became curious as they had been kept out of the loop. Hiruzen shook his head and answered, "After taking the precautions and increasing surveillance, no attack has taken place inside the village. I have kept an eye on the other villages as well. However, the ones who we were suspecting haven't made any suspicious moves. There is just one village that is acting suspiciously, a village none of us suspected." Hiruzen's words intrigued the room. Inoichi asked, "Which village is acting suspiciously?" Hiruzen replied, "Sunagakuren. It is also the reason why I called for an early council meeting." Hiruzen's words surprised most of the people in the room. Senju Hiramasa sighed. "Of all the people, the suspect has to be the one major village allied with us." Others had grim expressions as well. The alliance between Suna and Konoha was an important deterrent against Kumo and Iwa. Without it, Konoha could be attacked by 2 or 3 villages and would be stretched extremely thin. The losses they would suffer in such a situation would be horrendous. Except for Fujin, everyone in the room was worried. Hiruzen continued, "This is related to the incident in Yamakawa town we just discussed. We discovered a part of the deep scheme that they are plotting." Tsume said, "The town that Sunagakuren attacked. What was the reason behind their attack?" Hiruzen replied, "That attack wasn't conducted by Sunagakuren." The eyes of the people in the room widened. Every piece of evidence in the town pointed towards Sunagakuren. In fact, Konoha had officially reported to Tanagakuren that Sunagakuren was the one to attack the town and slaughter the Yamakawa family. Yet Hiruzen said the opposite. Koharu looked at Hiruzen and asked, "Did we set them up or was it someone else?" Hiruzen answered, "It is deeper than that. Even though Sunagakuren wasn't behind the attack, it was a ninja from Sunagakuren. The attack was conducted by Sasori of the Red Sand. I'm not aware why he attacked the town or why he eliminated the Yamakawa family, but we discovered something interesting from their mansion. Underneath the mansion, a secret hideout was constructed. The hideout contained the dead bodies of more than 20 Sunagakuren ninjas. Those bodies also included an elite jounin and a Fuinjutsu grandmaster. Their deaths happened at the same time as the attack. We read the memories of the head of the Yamakawa family to understand what exactly happened. We discovered that he had entered into an agreement with Sunagakuren to allow their ninjas to hide under his mansion. We read the memories of the Sunagakuren ninjas as well. Unfortunately, they didn't know much. The only important thing we discovered was that they were planning to hide several hundred ninjas inside the town. The entire room became silent. Everyone who wasn't already aware was shocked. There were 2 main reasons for the shock. The first was that a Fuinjutsu grandmaster had died. Every village treasured them. The death of a Fuinjutsu grandmaster was even more rare than the death of a rank S ninja. The second reason for the shock was the location of Yamakawa town. It was located right at the border of the Land of Fire. Having several hundred ninjas so close would mean that Suna could launch a surprise attack, while giving Konoha very little time to react. Chapter 580, Shikaku's Brilliance. Damned Sunagakuren. Their intentions are nefarious, Tsume cursed. If not for the incident, Konoha would be completely oblivious to Sunagakuren's schemes. It could have resulted in a catastrophe for Konoha if they failed to act appropriately. Of course, not everyone thought so. The remaining clan leaders and elders looked at Hiruzen, trying to gauge his reaction. There were some inconsistencies in his story. Hamura thought, there is more to this story. It seems like Hiruzen was already aware of Sunagakuren building a hideout there. The ninjas we sent after Tanagakuren's request only reached a couple of days after the incident. By then, most of the memories would have dissipated. Not to mention, Tanagakuren sent ninjas before us. They would have discovered Sunagakuren ninjas' bodies before our ninjas reached there. The only way for things to develop this way would be if some Konoha ninjas sneaked into the town right after the attack had taken place. However, that would only happen if Hiruzen was suspicious and sent someone there beforehand. The squads he sent should have witnessed the attack and likely took advantage of the situation, since Fujin had asked Hiruzen not to expose the fact that he was the one in the Yamakawa town who confronted Sasori. Hiruzen changed the story slightly. However, the experienced ninjas quickly understood how the events had happened. Only the civilians were clueless. Shikaku added, "To make matters worse, Sunagakure seems to be preparing for something. Their village has been closed off for a few months, making contacting the spies very difficult. Even though we aren't sure, we need to be prepared to deal with any stunts they might try to pull. We have to deal with whatever they throw at us swiftly and with minimal losses. Otherwise, things can become ugly very quickly," Hiruzen said. "Thankfully, the civil war in Kiri is still at a very high intensity. Kumo won't do anything until that civil war ends. As for Anoki, he won't start a war by himself. Regardless, what Shikaku said is correct. We will need to deal with their schemes quickly. If possible, we will still need to find a way to maintain our alliance after dealing with their scheme or come to a new agreement after defeating them. We will need to do that before the civil war in Kiri ends." For the first time, Fujin was surprised. He thought, seeing his attitude, it's no wonder Konoha let Suna off so lightly after the war. While I can understand that Kumo and Iwa are as strong as us, it's not like they don't have any enmity between themselves. Is there a need to be so passive? Fujin wasn't on board with staying so passive. After all, what if Sunagakure didn't follow the agreement once a war broke out? If Rasa hadn't died and continued being the Kazekage, he'd definitely take advantage of such a moment. That said, Fujin didn't speak up despite not agreeing with Hiruzen's methods. After all, it didn't have much to do with him. He already knew the future. He knew that there wouldn't be any war between Konoha and Kumo or Iwa. And he knew that Konoha and Suna would be very strong allies once Gaara took over. Of course, that was assuming Gaara still becomes the Kazekage. Inoichi asked, "Do you have any speculations about what their scheme might be?" Shikaku answered, "We have very little information as of now, so it is hard to say anything for sure. I did calculate several actions I could have taken if I were the Kazekage, but I failed to come up with any plans where they would confront us and not end up suffering. The only instance where they would benefit is if they ally with another major village. However, Kiri is embroiled in civil war while Kumo and Iwa haven't made any movements. Our spies haven't informed us of anything happening in those villages either. So it is difficult to say. With that option out of the way, there are only two other strategies through which they could benefit. However, both are extremely risky and not something I would have done. The first is making a sudden attack on the Land of Fire. Using the element of surprise, they can eliminate our patrol units and capture some of our land. If they succeeded in catching us by surprise, then we would need some time to respond. They could use that time to entice Kumo into making a move against us, forcing us to fight on two fronts. However, this plan hinges on whether Kumo would respond in time or not. If they don't, then Suna will suffer heavily. The second strategy is to do something during the Chunin exams. It could be a sudden attack with elite troops, or it could also be an attempt on Lord Hokage's life. The only problem is that they would be surrounded by Konoha's ninjas and would have to endure our assault, making it extremely risky unless they were planning on sacrificing their lives. Regardless, we need to be careful when they visit during the Chunin exams. Everyone thought for a bit and nodded. No one could think of any other possibility. Even Fujin was impressed as Shikaku had guessed Rasa's strategy despite having so little information. He thought, apart from guessing Orochimaru's involvement, he has guessed everything. "I wonder what Rasa would think if he knew, Choza said. Since they were creating a hideout in Yamakawa town, they could have also tried to do so in other towns that are along our border. We need to check the Land of River properly." Hiruzen replied, "They haven't. I suspected the same thing and sent Jiraiya to investigate. He didn't find any such hideout in other towns. I have even dispatched several Anbu squads to check whether they created any other hideouts along the border. We didn't discover anything. I believe that Yamakawa town was their first attempt, and since it resulted in such losses, they haven't tried it again. Even so, I'll continue investigating. Since Jiraiya was involved, no one suspected the information. Only Fujin thought, ugh, I hope Hiruzen doesn't send them to investigate deeper into the land of rain. Though the Anbu ninjas won't be able to detect it due to my seals, Jiraiya will immediately feel something off if he gets close enough. Though even if he does find it, I doubt he'd attack them. However, he'll report it to Hiruzen, which would make it difficult for me to move. Seeing that no one had anything else to say, Hiruzen said, we will maintain our high alertness. Since we have been maintaining it since the attack, it won't raise any suspicions and won't show sooner that we are aware of their schemes. We will keep it that way and catch them off guard. Start increasing the preparedness of your respective clans. Everyone will need to act immediately if Suna dares to make a move. Our counterattack has to be swift and deadly. The losses we inflict on them have to deter anyone else from having similar thoughts. If they dare to invade our territories, then we will dispatch an army within hours and will attack them within 24 hours. Even before any other village thinks of moving, we will force Suna to retreat not only from the land of fire but also from the land of rivers. If they make a move during the Chunin exams, I'll kill Rasa myself. You guys will ensure that no Suna ninja inside Konoha is able to leave in one piece. Despite being veterans of several wars and quite old, Hiruzen's words raised the morale of everyone in the room. Even Fujin was slightly impressed and thought, now that's more like it. Almost makes me wish that they invade the land of fire. It's been a while since I have fought unrestrained. Hiruzen looked around the room and asked, does anyone have anything else to discuss? He wasn't expecting anyone to reply as the village had been peaceful. To his surprise, Fujin took the initiative to speak for once. Even Shikaku was surprised as Fujin said, I have a proposal that will be helpful for our village. Considering what you said, it might probably be the best time to implement this. Fujin activated the storage seal on his bracer and withdrew a few files. Looking at more than a dozen files in front of Fujin, Shikaku wondered, since when did this troublemaker start working?